Your grandmother's table was already set before you understood what any of it meant. The pot liquor, the clay-colored beans, the sweet potato nobody called a superfood because it didn't need a name. You ate what was there. The whole country, family by family, was doing the same in different kitchens. 100 of those dishes are on this list. Scientists spent careers figuring out what your ancestors already knew. Section 1. Collard greens curtains. Door frames, the wood of the kitchen cabinets. A pot of collard greens cooking low had a way of claiming the whole house. Your people cooked them with a ham hock until the leaves broke down dark and silky. What collected at the bottom was pot liquor, and somebody always told you to drink it. That instruction was older than anyone at the table knew. On plantations, owners ate the greens and left the broth. Enslaved cooks kept it, sopped it with cornbread, and handed the habit down. West Africans arrived in America knowing hundreds of edible leafy species and recognized collard's value when British American cooks had abandoned it entirely. Research from the 1980s confirmed what that instinct already understood. 1 cup of boiled collard greens delivers 883% of the daily recommended vitamin K, plus sulforaphane, linked to reduced risk of lung, colon, breast, and prostate cancer. Nobody called it medicine. The pot just had to stay on. You spent years eating cancer-fighting compounds without knowing their name. The next dish fed your body differently, and scientists are still documenting exactly how. Section 2. Black-eyed peas dried. They sounded like small stones when your hand scooped them into the pot. Your family measured by the fistful and cooked them with a smoked ham hock until the liquid turned the color of strong tea. You ate them over rice on New Year's Day because that was what the first day required. Black-eyed peas are West African, cultivated for thousands of years before the early 1700s brought them to American soil. The Bantu word for them was niebe. They thrived in drought, fixed nitrogen into soil stripped bare by cotton and tobacco, and fed communities that had nothing else. On December 31, 1862, black-eyed peas were part of the meal eaten as Freedom's Eve. 1 cup delivers 13 grams of protein and 11 grams of fiber. A review of 23 studies found beans in this family reduced LDL cholesterol by 19% and coronary heart disease risk by 22%. Your family called them lucky. The science does not disagree. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That pea traveled from West Africa to American soil, and the science is still unfolding. The next dish made the same journey, and researchers found something equally specific inside it. Section 3. Sweet potatoes. Pull one from the coals and the inside is the color of sunset. Your grandmother baked them until the sugar bled out and hardened against the pan. The smell was deep and warm with nothing added. You ate it plain or with butter. Nobody called it a health food because it never needed that kind of recommendation. West African languages use the word nyami for the starchy tubers enslaved people left behind. Sweet potatoes were close enough to substitute, and the name followed, eventually anglicized into yam. Enslaved communities dug potato holes near their fires, hidden caches where sweet potatoes were stored through winter, out of sight of those who controlled everything else. 1 cup of baked sweet potato delivers more than 100% of the daily vitamin A and 30 milligrams of beta-carotene. To match that from broccoli alone, you would need 23 cups. Your family roasted them in the fire. Scientists spent decades catching up. That potato hole was food and resistance at once. The next dish also crossed the Atlantic with knowledge hidden inside it, and researchers found something that changed how scientists talk about an entire food category. Section 4. Okra cut it, and it pulled a thin thread between the blade and the board. Your family fried it in cornmeal or cooked it fast in tomatoes. Either way, okra was in the pot. It had been in the pot, in one form or another, for a very long time. Okra originated in Ethiopia, cultivated there as far back as 5,500 years ago, crossing the Atlantic in the 17th century through the slave trade. The word gumbo comes directly from the central Bantu term for okra, gumbo. In antebellum South Carolina, enslaved people dried the seeds and brewed them as a coffee substitute. Nothing was wasted. Scientists now study that viscous mucilage more closely than any other part of the plant. It forms a gel in the digestive tract that slows glucose absorption and feeds bifidobacterium and lactobacillus. A 2024 meta-analysis confirmed okra supplementation significantly reduced fasting blood glucose in type 2 diabetes patients. Your grandmother called it slimy. Researchers call it a functional food. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. You spent years frying out the very thing scientists now study hardest. The next dish was also cooked in your family's cast iron, and what researchers confirmed about the spice blend that defines it, placed 5 separate anti-inflammatory compounds in a single preparation your family made every Sunday. Section 5. Fried chicken Sunday dinner. Started with the sound of the skillet heating and the smell of the fat getting ready. Your family had a specific way. The seasoning in the flour, the thyme in the buttermilk, the temperature of the oil. You could tell your family's fried chicken from anyone else's before you tasted it. Enslaved West African women added the spice-heavy seasoning that distinguished Black American fried chicken from the plain Scottish frying tradition and made it one of the most recognized foods in culinary history. After emancipation, Black women sold it for economic independence, controlling a product that required skill the market could not easily replicate. The spice blend defines Black American fried chicken: paprika, garlic, onion, black pepper, and cayenne. Researchers have documented all 5 primary compounds as anti-inflammatory: capsaicin, allicin, quercetin, piperine, and capsaicinoids arrive together in a single coating. Your family called it the recipe. Scientists would call it a formulation. 5 separate anti-inflammatory compounds arrived at the table in one coating. The next dish was also made from what was handed down rather than chosen, and what it contained turns out to address one of the most documented nutritional gaps in the entire tradition. Section 6. Chitterlings. Cleaning chitterlings meant running them under cold water for hours, turning and checking every inch. By the time they went into the pot with onions and pepper, the kitchen had declared itself. You either grew up with that smell or you did not. If you did, you knew exactly what day it was. Slave owners kept the prime cuts and left the intestines. Enslaved cooks, rooted in a West African tradition of whole animal cooking, took what was discarded and developed methods to prepare it safely. That knowledge passed down alongside the recipe, keeping generations fed on something the people above them called garbage. By mid-century, it was substantial enough to produce the Chitlin circuit, where Black artists and soul food shared the same room. A 100-gram cooked serving delivers 19 grams of protein, 38% of the daily value for vitamin B12, and 170% for choline, now linked to liver function, metabolism, and mood. Nutritionists classify organ meats as the most nutrient-dense foods per calorie available. Your ancestors ate them because there was nothing else. Scientists now recommend the same meal. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What was handed down as waste was the most nutritious thing at the table. The next dish was also made from scraps and bones, and what researchers confirmed about it powers a $7 billion supplement industry. Section 7. Neck bones. You could tell by the smell when the pot had been going long enough. Neck bones started sharp and mineral and slowly turned into something round and deep, the kind of smell that made every room feel warmer by afternoon. Your family put them in with onions and garlic and let it run for hours because that was the only way to get anything out of the bones. Neck bones, ham hocks, and knuckles were what enslaved people received when the butchering was done. Everything else, the joints, the cartilage, the bone itself, came down. West African traditions of whole animal preparation understood long-simmered bones, and that knowledge traveled. The low, slow simmer became a household constant. Slow heat pulls collagen into gelatin, then into amino acids, glycine, proline, and glutamine. Glycine supports the gut lining, confirmed in a 2017 peer-reviewed review. Glucosamine and chondroitin, both released from cartilage, are sold as joint supplements in an industry worth over $7 billion. Your grandmother had a pot on the stove. That pot ran for hours before anyone thought to call it medicine. The next dish was also hiding in plain sight, and what researchers found inside it shifted an entire scientific conversation about inflammation. Section 8. Hot sauce. There was a bottle on every table, clear vinegar with whole peppers floating in it, or something redder and already mixed. You shook it over your greens, your beans, your fish, without thinking about what it was adding beyond heat. Your family put it on everything. It was part of the table the same way salt was. Chili peppers arrived in Africa through Portuguese traders in the 16th century and grafted onto existing traditions of cooking with heat. Enslaved cooks brought that practice to American kitchens, settling into pepper vinegar kept next to the stove year-round. In 19th century Philadelphia and Baltimore, Black cooks developed an heirloom variety called the fish pepper, kept secret and passed privately between households. Capsaicin binds to a receptor called TRPV1. That receptor's discovery earned the 2021 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Research confirmed capsaicin inhibits substance P, the primary neuropeptide driving inflammation, and reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines at the cellular level. The bottle on your grandmother's table was doing all of that. Nobody named it. Before we move on, If you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. You shook that bottle without reading a label. The next dish was also hiding its value in plain sight, and what researchers confirmed about it rewrote a cardiovascular conversation that had seemed settled. Section 9. Watermelon split one open in summer, and the inside is cold and red and sweet, in a way that felt like something between food and water. Your family cut it on the back porch, thick slices, seeds and all, juice running down to the elbow. Nobody worried about any of it. You ate it without apology. Watermelon is native to northeastern Africa, cultivated for over 4,000 years. Enslaved people carried the seeds across the Atlantic and grew watermelon in plantation gardens. After emancipation, black farmers became the country's largest watermelon producers. The racist caricature that arrived in the 1870s was a deliberate response to that economic independence. In 1930, scientists isolated an amino acid from watermelon they named citrulline, after the genus Citrullus. Citrulline converts to arginine, triggering nitric oxide production that relaxes blood vessels. A 2012 study confirmed watermelon extract reduced ankle blood pressure in adults with early hypertension. Lycopene, making the flesh red, is linked independently to reduced heart disease and cancer risk. What your family ate on the porch was cardiovascular medicine in a rind. Someone turned a symbol of your economic freedom into a joke, and the fruit was a blood pressure treatment the whole time. The next dish was also dismissed, and the science places it in the same category. Section 10. Molasses. Dark and slow from the jar, thicker than anything else in the kitchen, it smelled like something that had been cooking a long time. Your grandmother spooned it into biscuit dough, baked beans, gingerbread. You tasted it off the spoon once, and understood immediately why it needed to go into something else. Sugarcane juice is boiled 3 times during refining. The first 2 passes yield lighter syrup sold at premium. The third produces blackstrap molasses, the darkest residue, classified as waste for centuries. Enslaved people received it because refined white sugar went to those above them. That arrangement persisted past emancipation. 1 tablespoon of blackstrap molasses delivers 20% of the daily recommended iron, 10% for calcium, 10% for magnesium, and 9% for potassium. It carries more antioxidant activity than honey or maple syrup, and more iron than eggs ounce for ounce. The refined white sugar that went to those above them contains none of those things, nothing. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Your family sweetened with the part they were given, and that part held everything the refined version removed. The next dish followed the same logic, and researchers found something remarkable inside it. Section 11. Cornbread butter went into the cast iron first, then the oven until it sizzled along the edges, and then the batter went in and came back out with that dark crust on the bottom the iron had earned. That crust was the part everyone wanted. Your family made it without measuring a thing. Cornmeal was the most common ration given to enslaved people, the cheapest and coarsest grain available. West and Central Africans knew corn before the slave trade, the Portuguese having introduced it there first. Enslaved cooks developed hoe cakes baked in ashes, corn pone cooked over open fire, and eventually cornbread and cast iron passed through kitchens across the country. Coarse ground whole grain retains the germ and bran carrying B vitamins, iron, magnesium, and antioxidant carotenoids. A 1986 study confirmed cast iron cooking significantly increased the iron content of cornmeal. Your family baked both together without naming either advantage. The coarsest ration held the most. The next dish also required specific knowledge to unlock, and what researchers confirmed places it among the most studied foods in nutritional science. Section 12. Fried catfish. Hot oil and cornmeal hit you before you reached the door, then the fish going in, and the sound that came back was a constant wide hiss. The fish fry was never just a meal. Whoever was hosting had set something up earlier, a big pot or a propane burner outside, and people showed up because the smell told them where to go. West African communities fished catfish for centuries before the slave trade crossed the Atlantic. The Mississippi River Valley provided it in abundance, and enslaved people who had Saturday afternoons to themselves gathered around it, fried it, and made the event a social institution that traveled north with the Great Migration. Catfish was dismissed as a bottom feeder, the lowest fish in any market. Wild catfish is one of the few natural food sources of vitamin D, with researchers estimating more than 40% of American adults deficient in it. A cooked fillet delivers 600 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids and substantial vitamin B12. Your family fried the fish that doctors now tell patients to eat more of. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. You came for the company and the fish was doing something your body needed. The next dish also traveled to gatherings across the country, and the science behind what it contains belongs in the same conversation. Section 13. Red beans and rice Monday in New Orleans meant a pot on the stove nobody had to watch. Red beans went in with onion and celery and smoked meat, and the low heat did the work while the house moved on. By the time anyone came back, something had happened in that pot the beans could not do alone, and the rice could not do alone. You ate them together without needing a reason. West African traditions carried this dish through Haiti after the 1804 revolution, when thousands fled to New Orleans, and it settled into Monday because Monday was laundry day and beans could simmer unattended. It traveled north with the Great Migration, arriving in kitchens across Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia with the same logic: cheap, filling, and reliable. Beans are rich in lysine, the essential amino acid rice lacks. Rice contains methionine, which beans lack. Together they supply all 9 essential amino acids. A Brazilian study found a 60% beans to 40% rice mixture produced protein quality approaching that of milk. Your ancestors solved the chemistry without ever naming it. That pot knew something science had to catch up to. The next dish also required specific knowledge to unlock its value, and what researchers found inside it changed how scientists understand an entire food tradition. Section 14. Grits. Early in the morning, before anything else was on the stove, somebody had a pot of grits going. White and slow thickening, they needed watching and stirring. Butter went in toward the end, and salt, and they came to the table in a bowl that stayed warm all the way through breakfast. You ate them before you thought about what they were. Grits are ground from hominy, corn soaked in an alkaline solution of wood ash and water before drying and milling. That process is called nixtamalization, developed by indigenous peoples in Mesoamerica thousands of years before European contact. Enslaved cooks learned it from indigenous communities across the American South and kept the practice going. What the alkali does is release niacin, vitamin B3, that exists in corn in a form the body cannot absorb without it. South Carolina alone reported 30,000 pellagra cases in 1912, with a 40% fatality rate. Dr. Joseph Goldberger proved the dietary cause in 1915. Niacin was not formally identified until 1937. Black families had been releasing it from corn for generations. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Your family's breakfast pot was doing something scientists took decades to measure. The next dish also carried the same quiet intelligence, a preparation that protected without anyone naming what it protected against. Section 15. Buttermilk. Somebody poured it straight into a glass and drank it cold, and somebody else thought that was the strangest thing they had ever seen. Your family had a side in that debate. It went into biscuit dough, cornbread batter, and the bowl where the chicken soaked overnight. Everything it touched came out more tender. The tang was the point. Buttermilk is the liquid left after churning cream into butter. Before refrigeration existed, it was essential in hot southern kitchens because its lactic acid environment prevented the bacterial growth that spoiled fresh milk. You used it not because anyone understood the microbiology, but because it worked, and the alternative was waste. What fermentation produces is lactic acid bacteria, now formally classified as probiotics, alongside casein peptides released as those bacteria break down milk proteins. A 2015 meta-analysis of 30 randomized controlled trials confirmed these casein-derived peptides reduce systolic blood pressure by nearly 3 millimeters of mercury. Your family used it to keep food safe and make biscuits rise. Scientists spent decades working out what else it was doing. That tangy pour was protecting something specific. The next dish also worked in the background, relied on the same kind of transformation, and what researchers found inside it took a long time to reach the surface. Section 16. Sorghum. Copper-colored and thick, it came to the table as a syrup poured over biscuits the way cane molasses did. In West Africa, sorghum had been the daily grain for centuries, ground into flatbreads, cooked into stews, and fermented into beverages that kept the harvest through dry seasons. Enslaved Africans carried the seeds across the Atlantic and grew the plant in small plots alongside everything else they were keeping alive. By the mid-1800s, Northern abolitionists promoted sorghum syrup as a moral alternative to cane sugar produced by enslaved labor. Families pressed the stalks in horse-drawn mills and boiled the juice in open pans. After the Civil War disrupted cane production, sorghum became the people's sweetener across the South. What sorghum contains that no other cereal grain does is a class of antioxidants called 3-deoxyanthocyanidins, found in the bran layer. A 2004 study measured their antioxidant strength at 3 to 4 times higher than other whole grains. Standard food analysis methods historically failed to detect them. Your ancestors grew the grain. Scientists are still learning what it contains. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Your family kept a grain alive that science spent decades learning to measure. The next dish also survived dismissal, and what researchers confirmed about it changed how scientists think about dietary fat entirely. Section 17. Fatback and lard. White and solid, it sat on the back of the stove or in the cabinet, and when your grandmother spooned it into the skillet, the smell that came back was something old and specific, not unpleasant. Fatback went into greens. Lard went into biscuit dough and pie crust. Your family used it because it was there and because the food came out right. Enslaved people received lard and pork fat as their primary cooking fat. Fine cuts went to the house. In 1911, Procter & Gamble introduced Crisco, made by pumping hydrogen into cottonseed oil, and marketed it as a healthier alternative to animal fat. They published a free cookbook with 615 recipes requiring Crisco, and in 1948 donated $1.7 million to the American Heart Association, which endorsed vegetable oils over lard. Lard is 45% oleic acid, the same monounsaturated fat that makes olive oil celebrated. It has less saturated fat and less cholesterol by weight than butter. The trans fats that replaced it were linked to arterial disease, and the FDA banned partially hydrogenated oils in 2018. Your family cooked with the safer fat the whole time. The substitute was the problem. That white can was safer than what replaced it. The next dish also survived dismissal, and researchers found inside it the most potent natural anti-aging compound yet confirmed in any fruit. Section 18. Persimmons. Bite into one before the first frost and your mouth contracts, every surface pulling tight against itself, a sensation so complete it stays with you. Wait for the frost and the same fruit goes soft and almost translucent and tastes like apricot and honey. Knowing which one you were getting was the skill, and it was one your family carried. American persimmons are closely related to the ebony tree of West Africa. Culinary historian Michael Twitty has noted that enslaved Africans recognized it. They foraged it to supplement plantation rations, made it into pudding and bread, and fermented it into beer. In 1705, an English account described persimmon beer as food of the poorer sort, meaning enslaved people and indentured servants. Persimmons contain fisetin, identified in a 2018 study from the Scripps Research Institute and the Mayo Clinic as the most potent senolytic among 10 flavonoids tested. Senolytics clear senescent cells, the damaged cells that accumulate with age and drive chronic disease. Your family foraged the most promising natural compound researchers have yet found in any fruit. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Your people foraged the anti-aging compound that research institutions are racing to understand. The next dish was also gathered and brought to the table from the land, and what researchers confirmed about it addressed a condition that has burdened black families for generations. Section 19. Hibiscus. Steep the dried flowers in boiling water, and what comes back is a color so deep it doesn't belong in a cup. Ruby, almost purple at the edges, tart before it reaches your mouth. Your family served it cold and sweet at gatherings, spiced with ginger and cinnamon, and it went by different names in different houses. Sorrel, bissap, red drink, something your grandmother made for Juneteenth or Christmas without a recipe. Hibiscus sabdarifa is native to West Africa, still called bissap in Senegal. Euclid geographer Judith Carney documented that enslaved Africans carried the seeds across the Atlantic to the Caribbean, where the drink became known as sorrel. In the American South, the tradition transformed into red drink, tied to black gatherings and Juneteenth tables across the country. Black Americans have hypertension at higher rates than any other group in the United States. A 2025 umbrella review of 26 randomized controlled trials covering 1,797 participants confirmed that hibiscus tea consistently lowered both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, with reductions increasing alongside greater consumption. Your family was drinking the right thing. That celebration drink turned out to be the medicine. The next dish was also present at every gathering, and what researchers found inside it rewrote the conversation about a condition affecting black families for generations. Section 20. Ginger grated fresh, and the smell that comes off the board is clean and hot, something like citrus but sharper. Your family put it into gingerbread, snap cookies, and the sorrel drink, and someone in your house kept a piece in the freezer for tea when a cold came. It was the spice you reached for when something was wrong, and the spice already in everything else when nothing was. Ginger has been used in West African cooking for centuries, arriving in Black American kitchens through both culinary and folk medicine traditions. The compounds responsible for its heat, gingerol and shogal, influence glucose metabolism through the same enzyme pathways that pharmaceutical drugs target for diabetes management. A July 2025 systematic review published in a pharmacology journal synthesized 5 meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials and confirmed that 1 to 3 grams of ginger daily produced an average drop of more than 21 milligrams per deciliter in fasting blood glucose and a full 1 percentage point reduction in HbA1c in type 2 diabetes patients. Black Americans are diagnosed at rates 60% higher than white Americans. Your family put ginger in the cake and called it flavor. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Your people seasoned with the medicine and called it baking. The next dish also hid its most important work inside something ordinary, and scientists have only recently begun to trace exactly what it was doing. Section 21. Wild mushrooms. Something about finding the right tree. Hen of the woods grew at the base of old oaks in the fall, and if you knew what you were looking for, you could fill a bag without walking far. Your family knew the difference between what to take and what to leave, and they came back with something that smelled like rain and damp bark and nothing you could buy anywhere. Rural black communities in the South foraged wild mushrooms as part of the same survival practice that produced the provision gardens and the persimmon harvests. The mushroom was protein, flavor, and something to stretch what little else there was. It came from forested land that plantation owners controlled but could not fully police. Mushrooms produce a compound called ergothioneine that neither plants nor animals can manufacture. Only fungi make it. In 2020, biochemist Bruce Ames formally proposed it as a longevity vitamin. Low blood levels correlate with higher rates of frailty, cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, and Parkinson's disease. Your family went into the woods and came back with it and called it supper. Somebody knew which tree and which season, and that knowledge kept something in the body that science did not name until the 21st century. The next dish also required preparation knowledge to be safe, and what researchers found inside it is used in laboratories worldwide. Section 22. Poke salad. Come spring and the first tender shoots pushed up from the same thick root before anything else broke ground. Your family knew the plant, knew the spot, and knew exactly what to do with it. Boil the leaves, pour off the water. Boil them again, pour off that water too. Then cook what was left with bacon grease and onion. Miss a step and you were in trouble. Poke salad was survival food for enslaved people and the rural poor throughout the South. The preparation knowledge was the survival knowledge. The plant is toxic raw and requires a double boiling sequence to make safe. That knowledge passed through families the same way recipes did, by watching, not by writing. What scientists later found inside the leaves is pokeweed antiviral protein, the first of its kind ever identified, with demonstrated activity against multiple viruses. Pokeweed mitogen became a standard research tool in immunology, used in laboratories worldwide to stimulate immune cell responses. Phase 1 and 2 clinical trials for leukemia treatment have tested pokeweed-derived compounds since the 1980s. Your family boiled the poison out of a weed and served it for supper. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Your people held the preparation knowledge that turned the medicine into food. The next dish also required specific knowledge to unlock its value, and the science behind it places it among the most studied compounds in the world. Section 23. Turmeric. Grate it and your fingers go yellow, and the cutting board keeps the stain through multiple washings. What comes out of the root is golden and bitter, and smells earthy in a way that sits at the back of the nose. And your family used it in spice rubs and tonics the way folk medicine had used it for a very long time. Turmeric reached West Africa by 1200 and Jamaica by the 18th century, traveling through the same trade routes that moved people and knowledge across the African diaspora. It appeared in Black Caribbean cooking and in Black folk medicine, ground into spice blends and stirred into warm drinks against colds and joint pain. Curcumin, the active compound that gives turmeric its color, has been examined in more than 15,000 peer-reviewed studies. Without black pepper, almost none of it reaches the bloodstream. A 1998 study confirmed that piperine increases curcumin bioavailability by 2,000%. Your people put both in the pot together, without needing a study to tell them why. That golden root kept it secret until 1998, and your ancestors paired it correctly without knowing the mechanism. The next dish also held a compound that required a specific pairing to unlock, and what it contained feeds the microbiome in ways researchers are still fully mapping. Section 24. Chicory coffee. Darker than regular coffee, and with a body that held hot milk better than anything else. It was the morning cup in New Orleans, and at Café du Monde and everywhere the Black Creole tradition set the table. Your family knew the taste as something specific to that city, and what came back was different from what anyone else in the country was drinking. When Union naval blockades cut off coffee to New Orleans in 1862, Black Creole residents turned to roasted chicory root to stretch what coffee remained. After the war, most of the country moved back to plain coffee. New Orleans did not. The tradition held in the Black Creole kitchen the same way every hard-won survival adaptation held. Raw chicory root is 68% inulin by weight. A single cup of chicory coffee delivers 5 to 8 grams of it. Inulin is now identified as one of the most reliable prebiotic drivers of bifidobacterium in the human gut, bacteria whose expanding role in immune regulation, mood, and inflammation scientists are still mapping. Your family's morning cup was feeding the microbiome decades before anyone had a name for what it was doing. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That morning cup was doing something science needed a revolution in microbiome research to explain. The next dish was also present every morning in different kitchens, and what researchers found inside it rewrote a piece of science considered settled for decades. Section 25. Eggs. Crack it on the edge of the cast iron, and the sizzle that came back told you whether the pan was ready. Your family fried eggs in the same skillet they fried everything else, and they came out with crisped edges and the yolk running the way a yolk is supposed to run. Breakfast in your house was a specific event with a specific smell that reached you before you reached the kitchen. In 1968, the American Heart Association told the country to eat no more than 3 eggs per week. That recommendation, built on the idea that dietary cholesterol raises blood cholesterol, reduced egg consumption for nearly 50 years. It turned out to be wrong. In 2015, the U.S. Dietary Guidelines removed the restriction entirely. The egg was the only food in history ever specifically singled out this way. What an egg contains is a complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids, 147 milligrams of choline, lutein, and zeaxanthin linked to macular degeneration prevention, and vitamins B12, D, and A. Your family ate them every morning because they were affordable. The science eventually agreed. That breakfast was doing more than the guidelines said it should. The next dish was also a morning ritual dismissed by science and then vindicated by it, and what researchers confirmed about it represents one of the most dramatic reversals in nutritional history. Section 26. Coffee. Before anything else was on the stove, the percolator was already going. Your family had a specific amount and a specific way with it, and the smell that came through the hall before you were fully awake was the first signal that the morning was organizing itself. Coffee in your house was simply not optional. It was the first thing. For decades, doctors told patients to cut back or quit. Coffee was blamed for arrhythmias, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular risk. That consensus held from the 1960s through the 1980s. Then Norwegian researchers noticed something unusual. Regular coffee drinkers were developing liver disease at lower rates than expected. The findings seemed strange enough that it took years to take seriously. Coffee now has more protective associations in nutritional research than almost any other beverage. 3 to 4 cups daily is associated with a 40% lower risk of liver cirrhosis, a 25% lower risk of Parkinson's disease, and reduced rates of type 2 diabetes, depression, and cognitive decline. The active compounds are chlorogenic acid and caffeic acid, powerful polyphenols misread for 50 years. Your family drank it every morning without waiting for the science to confirm it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That morning ritual was protecting things doctors told your family to worry about. The next dish was also always in the background, and researchers eventually traced what it had been doing the whole time. Section 27. Onions. Before anything else went into the pot, the onion went in first. The sound of it hitting the hot pan, the smell that came up from the first layer, sharp and sweet at the same time, was the signal that cooking had started. Everything your family made began with that smell. It was automatic enough that nobody in the kitchen thought to question it. It just meant dinner was coming. Onions anchor every version of Black Southern cooking. The Creole holy trinity of onions, celery, and bell pepper starts every pot of gumbo, every bowl of red beans. Elsewhere the onion stayed, going into the greens, the beans, the rice. Your family used it without measuring, without thinking about it, without knowing. What onions hold is quercetin, the most abundant dietary flavonoid. A 2015 clinical trial confirmed quercetin from onion extract lowered systolic blood pressure in hypertensive patients by 3 millimeters of mercury. Quercetin is also now classified as one of the most potent natural senolytics, clearing damaged cells that accumulate with age and drive chronic disease. The very first thing in every pot was doing more than starting the flavor. That starting smell was doing something the rest of the meal never got credit for. The next dish was also always there in the background, and researchers traced what it had been doing since 2009. Section 28. The bay leaf. One went into the beans, one went into the greens, one went into the rice and the stewed meat and everything that cooked low and slow for hours. Dry, flat, and gray-green, it sat in the pot liquor the whole time, and before the food hit the table, somebody fished it out and set it aside. You ate around it your whole life without ever eating it. It was always there, and then it was gone. Elderberry syrup spans Black Southern, Appalachian, and West African herbal lineages and has been practiced as cold season prevention for centuries. Bay leaf belongs to every tradition of slow-cooked Southern food, settled into the black kitchen as a fixed assumption. Every long-cooked dish included one without anyone saying why. It went in because it always went in. A 2009 randomized controlled trial published in a nutrition journal found that consuming 1 to 3 grams of ground bay leaf daily for 30 days significantly reduced fasting blood glucose and improved cholesterol profiles in patients with type 2 diabetes. The active compounds, including catechins, caffeic acid, and eugenol, improve insulin receptor function. Your grandmother always removed it before the meal. Researchers are still studying what it left behind. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The thing removed before serving was doing something in the pot nobody named until 2009. The next dish was also baked into something your family made by hand, and the science places what it contains in a category almost nothing else occupies. Section 29. Beni seeds. Toast them in a dry pan, and the kitchen fills with something nutty and slightly burnt, deeper than any other seed. Your family knew them as beni, not sesame. They went into Charleston wafers, flat and pressed thin. The seeds spread through them the color of pale gold. Made for company and special occasions, they traveled through the Gullah Geechee kitchen for 300 years. Bene is the Wolof word for sesame, and enslaved Africans from Senegambia and the Gold Coast brought the seeds to South Carolina in the early 1700s. Historical records from 1739 document bene cakes as portable rations during the Stono Rebellion. Gullah Geechee families grew them in provision gardens, preserving a specific heirloom lineage that modern genetic analysis has confirmed shares unique markers with West African landraces. Sesame produces 2 lignans, sesamin and sesamolin, found in meaningful concentrations in almost no other food. A 2024 systematic review of clinical trials confirmed sesame supplementation significantly reduces blood pressure in people with hypertension. These compounds also reduce LDL cholesterol and carry documented anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer properties. Your family baked them into thin wafers. Scientists spent decades confirming what those wafers contained. That crisp cookie was doing something nobody measured for centuries. The next dish was also made by hand and preserved in jars, and what researchers confirmed about it belongs in the same conversation as some of the most studied antiviral compounds in botanical medicine. Section 30. Elderberry syrup. Somebody in your family knew the bush. They knew where it grew and when the berries came in clusters, heavy and dark purple, and they gathered enough to fill a pot. The simmering brought out a color so deep it looked almost black, and what strained through the cloth and settled into the jar was kept through the cold months and dosed by the spoonful. Elderberry syrup spans Black Southern, Appalachian, and West African herbal lineages and has been practiced as cold season prevention for centuries. The preparation requires cooking. Raw elderberries contain cyanogenic compounds that cause illness, so the simmering step was not optional. That specific knowledge of exactly what to do with the plant was the knowledge. It passed the same way everything else passed, by watching and by being shown. Elderberry's active compounds are cyanidin-3 glucoside and cyanidin-3 sambubioside, anthocyanins that inhibit viral attachment to cells and modulate the immune response. A 2016 randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial of 312 air travelers found elderberry reduced cold duration by 2 days and severity by 33%. A 2019 meta-analysis across 4 randomized clinical trials confirmed the effect. Your family bottled it in cold glass jars. Scientists are still working out the mechanism. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That jar was doing something medicine is still catching up to. The next dish was also preserved from a wild source, and what researchers confirmed, concentrates a compound that raw preparation cannot deliver. Section 31. Stewed tomatoes. In late summer, the kitchen ran hot for days. Tomatoes came in faster than anyone could eat them fresh, and got cooked down and jarred, the lids sealing with a specific pop that meant everything had set right. Rows of them lined the shelf by fall. going darker as the season moved toward cold, and all winter they went into the stew and the sauce. Black Southern kitchens put up tomatoes the way they put up everything the garden offered, out of necessity and habit, because winter was coming and nothing went to waste. The canning was labor, boiling and filling and waiting, and the jars carried the work of summer into months when nothing was growing. Lycopene, the compound that gives tomatoes their red color, is among the most studied carotenoids in nutritional science. Raw tomatoes contain it, but the body absorbs almost none in an uncooked state. A 2002 study from Cornell University found cooking tomatoes increased lycopene bioavailability by 54% at 2 minutes, with longer cooking pushing that past 170. Your family stewed theirs for hours, combined them with fat, and sealed them into jars. They built the optimal delivery system years before the science existed. Those red jars concentrated something raw tomatoes cannot deliver. The next dish was also transformed by heat and time, and what researchers confirmed about it changed the entire regulatory category of dietary fiber. Section 32, oatmeal. Started on the stove, not in the microwave, in a pot with water that came to the boil before the oats went in. The heat dropped and the stirring started, the whole thing thickening into something pale and filling and specific to that morning. Your family added brown sugar or butter or nothing at all, and it came to the table in a bowl that stayed warm longer than anything else. Oatmeal was poor people's food by price, and rich people's food by what it did. Affordable enough for any household, filling enough to hold a person through hard physical work, it went into black kitchens across the South and the North on those terms, and stayed there through every generation that followed. In 1981, researchers confirmed that beta-glucan, the soluble fiber released when oats are cooked, lowered blood cholesterol. In 1997, oatmeal became the first food in history to receive a food-specific health claim from the FDA, a decision that changed how the entire category of dietary fiber is regulated worldwide. The FDA required 3 grams of beta-glucan daily, roughly equivalent to 1.5 cups of cooked oatmeal. Your family made that every morning. Nobody counted grams. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That bowl rewrote what a health claim could look like in this country. The next dish was also ordinary on the table, and remarkable in the lab, and what researchers found inside it places it in the same company. Section 33, apple cider vinegar. A splash went on the greens before they hit the table, into the potato salad, the pickle brine, and the barbecue sauce. Your family kept a bottle without thinking because it always made the food taste right. Apple cider vinegar was folk medicine in black Southern households before anyone studied it. Drunk for colds, used on bee stings and skin. The specific claim shifted family to family, but the practice stayed. Acetic acid activates AMP, the same switch triggered by exercise and metformin. A 2025 systematic review of 7 clinical trials confirmed ACV significantly reduced fasting blood glucose in type 2 diabetes patients. Your family poured it on greens and called it seasoning. Scientists call it a caloric restriction mimetic. That splash was doing something medicine is still mapping. The next dish also sat in plain sight, and what researchers confirmed about it changed how scientists understand a fundamental cooking process. Section 34. Mustard greens sharper than collards and more bitter. They went into the pot with a smell that told you something different was happening. Your family mixed them with collards and turnips, the mustard providing the edge that kept the pot from going flat. You could taste the difference every time. Mustard greens belong to the same cruciferous family as collards, but produce different chemistry when cut. Sinigrin converts to allyl isothiocyanate, the same molecule that gives wasabi its burn. Research has demonstrated allyl isothiocyanate selectively destroys cancer cells while leaving healthy tissue intact. A 2011 study confirmed this specifically against bladder cancer cells. Your family added the sharper greens because the pot needed them. Researchers are still mapping what else they do. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Your pot held cancer-fighting chemistry from multiple directions. The next dish was assembled without measuring, and what researchers found in the spices changed how doctors think about blood sugar. Section 35, sweet potato pie. Come Thanksgiving, and the smell of cinnamon and nutmeg from the oven was the signal the holiday had started. Your family made it without a written recipe, the amounts crossed out and rewritten by different hands over the years. Nobody measured the cinnamon, they just knew. Sweet potato pie's spice blend has been studied independently of the base. Cinnamon specifically has been examined in more than 10 randomized controlled trials measuring its effects on blood glucose. A 2013 meta-analysis found cinnamon reduced fasting blood glucose by nearly 25 milligrams per deciliter. Cinnamaldehyde mimics insulin function at the cellular receptor level. Your family never thought of it as a metabolic intervention. It was the pie that meant the holiday was real. Scientists needed 10 trials to confirm what your grandmother knew by smell. The next dish was also measured by feel, and the science inside it rewrote how doctors think about blood sugar. Section 36. Peaches. August meant peaches. They came in at their peak and lasted 2 weeks. Eaten fresh over the sink or cooked into cobbler in a cast iron pan with butter and brown sugar and a biscuit crust laid over the top. They were the fruit that had a season and meant that season and nothing else. Black farmers in Georgia and South Carolina became the country's largest peach producers after emancipation, building real economic independence firmly on the crop. Peaches contain chlorogenic acid, a polyphenol that inhibits enzymes converting starch to glucose, producing a slower blood sugar response. A 2010 Texas A&M study found that peach polyphenols reduced metabolic syndrome markers significantly. Your family ate them by the boxful every August. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That boxful was doing something researchers are still measuring. The next dish also arrived seasonally, and the science behind what it contains is among the most replicated in nutritional research. Section 37. Sweet tea. Brewed strong and poured over ice. It sat on the table at every gathering. Your family made it by the gallon, adding sugar while the tea was still hot. The color ran deep amber in the glass and near black in the pitcher. It was never water when sweet tea was available. Tea contains theaflavins, produced exclusively during the oxidation of black tea leaves. No other commonly consumed beverage produces them in meaningful concentration. A 2016 randomized controlled trial found theaflavin-rich black tea extract reduced LDL cholesterol by 16% over 4 weeks. Theaflavins inhibit the same cholesterol-producing liver enzyme targeted by statin medications. Your family drank it purely for the taste. The cardiovascular work came along without anyone counting. That amber pitcher was delivering something specific to the heart. The next dish was also a daily constant, and what researchers found inside it belongs in the same category. Section 38. Butter beans shelled on the back porch in summer. Hull by hull, they cooked down pale and creamy and tasted more substantial than their color suggested. Your family made them with smoked meat and onion until the liquid was thick. Nothing in that pot went to waste. Butter beans arrived through the Atlantic Exchange, sustaining black southern kitchens. They carry folate, iron, potassium, and soluble fiber, but dedicated research has focused on something rarer. L-Dopa, a precursor the brain uses to produce dopamine, is concentrated in butter beans at notably high levels. Researchers studying Parkinson's disease have examined dietary L-Dopa as a potential neuroprotective contributor. Your family shelled them on the back porch all summer. Scientists are still measuring what happened next. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Those creamy beans contain something neuroscience is still working through. The next dish was also gathered by hand from the yard, and the science places what it contains in a category almost nothing else occupies. Section 39. Dandelion greens. Before the grass came back fully in spring, they were pushing up in the yard already, low and bitter, and someone in your family knew which ones to take. Young leaves went into the pot with other greens. Your grandmother called them by a name that may not have been botanical. She was right about them in every specific way. Dandelion carries taraxacin and taraxacerin, bitter compounds studied for liver enzyme activity and bile production. A 2016 study confirmed blood glucose lowering effects from dandelion root extract. Prebiotic fiber also lives in dandelion root, as inulin, specifically feeding bifidobacterium. 3 separate mechanisms, 1 yard plant, 1 grandmother's knowledge of exactly when to pull them. Your family always pulled the right weed. The bitter yard plant addressed liver, blood sugar, and gut bacteria simultaneously. The next dish was also gathered close to home, and what researchers found inside it belongs in the most remarkable category on this list. Section 40. Wild game. Somebody in your family hunted or knew somebody who did, and the rabbit came back cleaned and ready. Smothered down with onion and thyme until it fell from the bone, the gravy running dark and thick. It tasted like something specific to that season and place. Hunting supplemented meager protein rations enslaved people received. That tradition continued into the 20th century as practical supplement across black southern households. Wild rabbit contains more protein per ounce than chicken, alongside zinc, B12, and bioavailable heme iron. It also carries conjugated linoleic acid, associated with reduced body fat accumulation. Nutritional scientists describe wild game as one of the closest dietary analogs to what human biology evolved expecting precisely. Your family called it supper. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That wild protein was closer to what human biology evolved expecting than almost anything on the modern table. The next dish was also gathered by hand, and the science behind it rewrote a nutritional conversation. Section 41. Field peas, purple hull peas came in at the height of summer, and the whole family sat around a bucket or a newspaper spread on the kitchen floor, shelling them into a bowl until there was enough to cook. The hulls split purple and the peas inside were pale and speckled, and they smelled green and fresh in a way that only freshly shelled things smell. You ate them that day or the next. Field peas, including Crowder peas, iron and clay peas, and purple hull varieties, represent a family of legumes distinct from black-eyed peas, though closely related. They have been cultivated across the American South since the colonial period, grown by enslaved people in provision gardens and carried forward through every generation of black Southern agriculture since. Purple hull peas derive their color from anthocyanins, the same class of antioxidant compound responsible for the properties of blueberries and elderberries. Research on field pea anthocyanins has found significant anti-inflammatory activity alongside resistant starch that slows glucose absorption after meals. A 2018 study found field pea consumption significantly improved gut microbiome diversity in participants. Your family shelled them for hours across summer afternoons. That was the medicine being assembled. Shelling peas in summer was building something specific for the body. The next dish on this list was also gathered close to home and seasonal, and what researchers found inside it placed it among the most studied compounds in aging science. Section 42. Muscadine jelly. Come September, the muscadine vines that grew along the fence or down some road your family knew were heavy with clusters of thick-skinned dark grapes, and the ripe ones fell into your hand when you reached for them. Some got eaten right there, and the rest went home for jelly, cooked down with sugar and pressed through cloth until what came out was deep purple and set clear in the jar. Muscadine grapes are native to the American South and have never been widely commercially cultivated, keeping them in black Southern foraging traditions long after other wild fruits became less central to the table. Gullah Geechee communities, Appalachian families, and rural black households across Georgia and the Carolinas gathered them each September as a matter of season and rhythm. Muscadines contain ellagic acid at concentrations higher than any other commonly consumed fruit. Ellagic acid is among the most studied natural compounds in cancer prevention research, with documented effects against cervical, breast, colon, and esophageal cancer cells in multiple laboratory studies. Muscadines also contain resveratrol and quercetin, concentrated in the thick skins. Your family pressed the jelly through cloth in the kitchen. Scientists spent decades learning what went through with it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That jar of jelly held some of the most studied cancer prevention compounds found in any fruit. The next dish on this list was also preserved from a wild source, and also held something that belongs in the rarest category in nutritional science. Section 43. Dried figs. Dried and kept through winter, they came from a tree in the yard or from the store in a jar in the cabinet, chewy and dense and sweet in a way specific to the dried form. They went into pound cakes, onto biscuits with butter, into the hand of a child heading somewhere. They were a treat that came from a known place and lasted, which in a kitchen with nothing to spare was the whole point. Fig trees have grown in black Southern yards since the colonial period, representing food security and continuity with West African fruit cultivation traditions. The tree asked almost nothing of the soil and gave reliably each season, which made it a constant in provision gardens and in the yards of sharecroppers and homesteaders long after freedom. Dried figs contain one of the highest concentrations of benzaldehyde found in any common food, a naturally occurring compound studied for its ability to induce programmed cell death in cancer cells. Early human trials conducted in Japan in the 1980s observed tumor regression in patients treated with fig-derived benzaldehyde preparations. Figs also contain inulin, the prebiotic fiber that specifically feeds bifidobacterium, and the highest calcium content of any fruit. Your grandmother kept them in a jar. The science was in the jar with them. The fig in the cabinet held something that researchers in 3 countries were studying at the same time. The next dish on this list also carried something specific and rare, and the tradition of preparing it preserved knowledge scientists are only now beginning to fully verify. Section 44. Black walnuts. The smell came from the husks first, dark and chemical, and unlike anything else, and it stayed on your hands for days, regardless of what you used to wash it off. Your family gathered them from trees that dropped every fall, wearing old clothes and gloves that wouldn't come clean, filling buckets and letting them harden until the shell inside could be cracked. Nobody cracked black walnuts without the right rock and the right patience. Black walnut trees are native to the eastern United States and have been gathered by indigenous communities, enslaved people, and their descendants as a fall food source for centuries. The husks served as a dye, the green outer casing as a folk remedy for parasites and skin conditions, and the meat as concentrated nutrition through winter months when other food was scarce. Black walnuts contain juglone, a compound the tree produces as a natural antimicrobial that has been studied in laboratory models for its ability to selectively disrupt cancer cell metabolism without harming healthy cells. They also carry among the highest concentrations of omega-3 fatty acids of any tree nut. Your family cracked them for the flavor and the patience of it. Researchers are still cataloging everything inside. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Those stained hands were the price of something researchers are still mapping. The next dish on this list also came from a specific tree your family knew how to find, and what science eventually uncovered about it sits in a category that surprised even the researchers who found it. Section 45, Sassafras Tea. The root came from the woods in early spring, scraped and dropped into boiling water until the kitchen filled with something that smelled exactly like root beer before root beer existed, which was because root beer was made from it first. Your family drank it as a spring tonic, the liquid running pink in the cup, and called it the cleanser, the blood thinner, the thing that got the winter out. Sassafras tea was among the most widely used folk medicines in the American South, practiced by indigenous communities for centuries, and passed into Black Appalachian and Southern traditions, where it became a standard spring ritual. It was the first distinctly American contribution to European medicine, exported back to England in the 1600s as a cure for syphilis and fever. In 1960, the FDA banned safrole, the active compound in sassafras, after studies in rodents linked high doses to liver tumors. The ban was the first time the FDA removed a traditional food on cancer grounds. Subsequent research established that safrole's effects were dose-dependent and that amounts from traditional tea preparations fell well below harm thresholds. Your family had been drinking the correct amount for generations. The science, once it arrived, confirmed the dose was right. That pink tea held a controversy that changed FDA regulation permanently. The next dish on this list was also foraged in early spring and holds science that researchers are still in the middle of proving. Section 46, Ramps. 2 weeks every April, no more. And you had to know the hollow or the hillside where they grew, or you would miss them entirely. Your family gathered the whole plant, the broad leaves and the small white bulb and the stem between them, and the smell that came off everything they touched for the next day was garlic and onion and something more aggressive than either. You either knew the smell or you did not. Ramps, wild leeks native to Appalachian woodlands, have been gathered by indigenous communities for centuries and became deeply embedded in Black Appalachian foodways, passed through the same networks of foraging knowledge that preserved poke salad and elderberry traditions. They appeared on Black family tables as a spring green, pickled and fried and cooked into eggs, eaten with the awareness that their season was short and their value immediate. Ramps contain organosulfur compounds including allicin, at concentrations higher than cultivated garlic, alongside quercetin, kaempferol, and selenium in bioavailable form. A 2015 study confirmed that ramp extract demonstrated potent antimicrobial activity against a broad range of pathogens. Research continues on their specific antioxidant profile. Your family ate them for 2 weeks every April. That was exactly when the body needed them most after winter. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That 2-week window delivered something the body had spent all winter without. The next dish on this list was also gathered from the wild in its season, and what researchers found inside it placed it among the most pharmacologically remarkable fruits native to North America. Section 47, Pawpaw. Soft and yellow-green and bruising, before you finished carrying them home, they tasted like banana and mango, and something that had no name because nothing else tasted quite that way. Your family found them along creek banks in late summer, recognizable by the smell of ripe fruit before you could see the tree, and they had to be eaten within a day or two of picking because nothing kept them. That was just the nature of the thing. Pawpaws are native to the eastern United States and were food for indigenous communities across the continent long before European contact. Enslaved people and their descendants gathered them from the wooded creek bottoms of the South and Mid-Atlantic, the fruit too fragile for any market that required shipping, keeping it entirely within the hands of people who knew where it grew. Pawpaw seeds and bark contain acetogenins, compounds studied intensively since the 1980s, for their ability to disrupt ATP production specifically in drug-resistant cancer cells. A 1997 study from Purdue University identified over 50 active acetogenins from the pawpaw plant, several demonstrating potency against cancer cell lines 1,000,000 times stronger than standard chemotherapy agents at equivalent doses. Your family ate the fruit and left the seeds. Researchers spent 3 decades learning why that mattered. The tree along the creek bank was holding something that cancer researchers have studied for 40 years. The next dish on this list was also made from something your family typically discarded, and what researchers confirmed was inside it changed the entire conversation about a specific fruit. Section 48. Watermelon rind pickles. What the table left behind got pickled. The rind came off in thick white strips after the red was eaten, and someone in your family salted it and packed it into jars with vinegar and sugar and cinnamon and cloves, and what came out was crisp and sweet and sharp at the same time, and lasted through months when nothing fresh was available. It used every part. That was simply how the kitchen worked. Watermelon rind pickling is among the most specifically Black American food traditions, a direct descendant of West African whole animal, whole plant cooking practices, adapted to a kitchen where nothing could be wasted. The practice preserved not just food, but the specific knowledge of how to transform what others discarded into something worth eating, a transformation that ran through every section of the Black kitchen. The white rind of a watermelon contains a significantly higher concentration of citrulline than the red flesh that most people eat. A single cup of white rind delivers several times the citrulline of an equivalent serving of the flesh, and citrulline converts in the body to arginine, which triggers nitric oxide production and relaxes blood vessels. Your family ate the part everyone else threw away. It was doing more than the red part. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The discarded rind held the highest concentration of the cardiovascular compound. The next dish was also dismissed as food for the poor for generations, and what researchers found inside it placed it in the same company as a compound wealthy people were drinking at dinner. Section 49. Peanuts roasted in the shell over a fire. They smelled like something between bread and salt, cracked open with your thumb and eaten warm. Or someone in your family boiled them in salted water until the shell went soft and the inside turned dense and creamy. You ate them without thinking. Peanuts were just there. Enslaved West Africans introduced the Carolina African runner peanut to Charleston in 1690, and peanuts became part of the Middle Passage, one of the few foods given to enslaved people on the crossing. In America, peanuts were dismissed as food for the poor and the enslaved. George Washington Carver spent decades developing more than 300 products from them at Tuskegee Institute. USTA researchers confirmed peanuts contain resveratrol, the same antioxidant found in red wine, and linked to reduced cardiovascular disease and cancer risk. 1 ounce carries 73 micrograms of it. The food of the enslaved had what wealthy people were drinking at dinner. The compound was there the whole time, in a food they called beneath them. The next dish was also built from humble ingredients, and what researchers found inside it rewrote the conversation about a fundamental question in bone and cardiovascular health. Section 50. Macaroni and cheese, baked with a crust on top from the oven and creamy underneath, or made on the stove top with the sauce coating every noodle. It came to the table in the largest pan available and still ran out before the plate made it back around. Your family's version was the one other people asked about and then tried to replicate without success. The eggs in the custard, the specific cheese, the amount of butter, none of it was written down. Macaroni and cheese entered Black American foodways through James Hemings, the enslaved cook who trained in Paris, and returned to Monticello where he refined the dish in Thomas Jefferson's kitchen. Hemings prepared it for state dinners beginning in the 1790s, making the dish familiar to American tables at the highest level while never receiving credit for the craftsmanship that defined it. Aged cheddar and similar cheeses contain vitamin K2 in a form called MK4, a specific menaquinone that directs calcium into bones rather than arteries, reducing both osteoporosis and cardiovascular calcification simultaneously. Research published from the Rotterdam study in 2004 found high dietary K2 intake associated with a 57% reduction in cardiovascular mortality. Your family baked it golden every holiday. The K2 was in every layer. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That golden crust was delivering something that keeps calcium in the right places. The next dish on this list was also a gathering staple with specific science inside it that researchers only recently fully understood. Section 51. Spice bushberries. Small and red and waxy in fall, they grew on the spicebush shrub along creek edges and wood margins, and your family knew what they were and when to gather them because that knowledge was specific and had to be passed directly. Dried and used as a spice, they smelled like allspice and bay and cinnamon at the same time, and they went into game dishes and preserved meats and wherever something needed warmth and depth. Spicebush is the only major culinary spice native to the eastern United States. Before European contact, indigenous nations across the continent used it as food, medicine, and ceremonial plant, and the knowledge passed into Black Appalachian and Southern foodways through the same cross-cultural exchanges that shaped every other aspect of survival cooking in the region. Spicebush berries contain significant concentrations of lindorolactone and a unique set of sesquiterpenes found in almost no other commonly consumed plant. Early pharmacological research demonstrated antimicrobial, antifungal, and anti-inflammatory properties in spicebush extract. The specific compounds remain understudied compared to the plant's pharmacological potential, making it one of the genuine frontiers in ethnobotanical research. Your family used it because they knew the shrub. Researchers are still learning what the shrub knew. The only Native American spice has barely been studied. The next dish on this list was also native grown and specifically Black American, and what researchers confirmed about what it contains placed it in a conversation with some of the most important compounds in nutritional science. Section 52, Jerusalem artichokes. Knobbly and dirt-covered and misshapen, they came out of the ground in late fall and tasted like water chestnuts crossed with something earthier, and they could be eaten raw or roasted or sliced thin into dishes that needed texture. Your family grew them in a corner of the garden because once you planted them, they came back every year without asking anything further, which in a kitchen garden was its own kind of value. Jerusalem artichokes, also called sunchokes, are native to North America and were cultivated by indigenous communities before European contact. Enslaved Africans incorporated them into provision gardens and later Black household gardens throughout the South and Mid-Atlantic, where their reliability and flavor made them a practical staple that required almost no labor to maintain year after year. Sunchokes contain the highest concentration of inulin of any commonly eaten vegetable, delivering between 16 and 20 grams of prebiotic fiber per 100 gram serving. Inulin from sunchoke specifically has been shown to selectively increase bifidobacterium populations in the gut by a factor of 10 in controlled trials. It also significantly reduces post-meal blood glucose spikes by slowing gastric emptying. Your family grew them because they came back reliably. The prebiotic fiber came back with them. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The most prebiotic-dense vegetable in the garden grew itself every year. The next dish on this list also asked almost nothing to maintain and gave something specific and documented, and the science behind what it contains reaches into one of the most important areas of modern research. Section 53, Hickory nuts. The hulls cracked open on their own when they were ready, splitting into 4 sections and dropping the nut onto the ground, and your family gathered them from under the trees in October, before the squirrels took everything. Cracking them required more effort than any other nut, because the shell was thick and the meat was dense inside it, locked into crevices that required a pick to get the whole thing out. What came out was worth the work. Hickory trees are native across eastern North America and represent one of the oldest continuous food traditions in the region. Indigenous communities pressed hickory nuts into a dense milk called pauco hicora, used as both food and cooking fat, and this practice influenced the way Black families in the South used every part of the nut across generations of woodland gathering. Hickory nuts contain the highest caloric density of any North American tree nut, along with a fat profile dominated by oleic and linoleic acids in roughly equal proportion, a balance associated with reduced cardiovascular risk. They also contain manganese at concentrations that support bone density and antioxidant enzyme function, and thiamine in amounts that cover a significant portion of daily requirements. Your family gathered them in October because the squirrels were competition. That was the only measure anyone used. The densest native nut asked only for a good rock and patience. The next dish on this list was also gathered from the land by specific knowledge, and what it contained has been studied for its effects on one of the most widespread chronic conditions affecting Black families. Section 54, Honey. Near the stove with a crust of dried honey around the lid that never fully came clean, it sat within reach at all times. Your family spooned it into hot tea, over biscuits, into remedies for coughs and sore throats, and directly off the spoon when nobody was paying attention. The color varied by season and what was blooming, running from pale gold to amber so dark it looked almost brown. Beekeeping holds a long tradition in Black American communities, with free black beekeepers documented throughout the antebellum South and honey gathering embedded in West African traditions that crossed the Atlantic. Black rural families maintained hives and gathered from wild colonies as a practical source of both sweetener and medicine that cost nothing but knowledge and patience. Raw honey produces hydrogen peroxide through enzymatic activity when it contacts damaged tissue, a mechanism confirmed effective in burn and wound treatment across multiple randomized controlled trials. The World Health Organization recognizes honey as an evidence-based cough suppressant. A 2012 clinical trial found honey outperformed diphenhydramine for children's nighttime cough. Your grandmother kept it near the stove for both reasons at once. Science eventually confirmed that the flavor and the medicine were the same thing. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That golden jar was doing clinical work and kitchen work simultaneously. The next dish on this list was also kept within arm's reach at all times, and what researchers confirmed about its active compounds placed it among the most potent natural antimicrobials documented in any common plant. Section 55. Thyme dried in a jar or pulled fresh from a pot by the back door. It went into everything that spent time on the stove. Your family added it to greens, beans, smothered chicken, and the seasoning blend that hit the cast iron before anything else. Measured the same way everything that mattered was measured, which was by smell and by what felt right for the size of the pot. Thyme has been a kitchen herb in Black American cooking since the colonial period, arriving through West African spice traditions that prioritized aromatic herbs in slow-cooked dishes. It settled into the soul food kitchen as part of what gave the food its specific depth, appearing in the Creole seasoning base alongside the Holy Trinity and in the dry rub tradition before every long-cooked cut of meat. Thymol and carvacrol, the primary active compounds in thyme, have been confirmed in multiple laboratory and clinical studies as among the most potent natural antimicrobial agents found in any common plant. A 2011 study found thymol effective against 120 strains of bacteria, including antibiotic-resistant varieties. Carvacrol has been shown in laboratory models to disrupt cancer cell membranes without affecting healthy tissue. Your family pinched it into the pot and called it seasoning. Scientists needed the laboratory to confirm what the kitchen already knew. Pinching thyme into the pot was adding one of the most potent natural antibiotics in any kitchen herb. The next dish on this list was also in the seasoning tradition and held something specific, and what researchers confirmed about it changed how nutritional scientists think about grain nutrition entirely. Section 56. Millet ground into flour, cooked into porridge, or added to flatbreads and thick stews. It fed West and Central African populations for millennia before rice and maize arrived, and the knowledge of it crossed the Atlantic in memory and in the understanding of what the body required through seasons, when nothing else grew reliably. Your family may have known it through specific dishes or lost the name while keeping the practice, which was how so much of the food tradition survived the crossing. Millet predates rice as a primary staple across large portions of West Africa where enslaved populations originated, documented in Senegal and Sudan going back at least 3,000 years. Tuskegee Institute studied millet through the early 20th century as a high-yield, drought-resistant crop suited to southern soil, connecting its African origins to American agricultural potential explicitly. Millet is gluten-free and delivers 19% of the daily magnesium requirement per cooked cup, alongside significant phosphorus, manganese, and B vitamins. Critically, millet contains lignans at concentrations comparable to flaxseed, compounds studied extensively for their role in reducing breast and prostate cancer risk through estrogen receptor modulation. Your family grew it when the soil was poor. It thrived precisely in those conditions. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The drought-resistant grain held cancer prevention compounds comparable to flaxseed. The next dish on this list was also at the center of every meal and held something specific, and researchers confirmed that what was on the table changed the body's ability to absorb everything else around it. Section 57. Black pepper. Next to the salt on every table your family ever set, the shaker was refilled before anything else ran out. Your family ground it into seasoning blends, pressed it into meat before frying, shook it over greens straight from the pot, and added it to combinations nobody measured, because those combinations had long since become instinct. The bite it left on the tongue told you the dish had been done correctly. Black pepper has been the most traded spice in human history, moving across continents for 4,000 years along routes passing through the same West African communities from which enslaved people were taken. Its presence in Black American cooking arrived not only through European influence but through an existing African familiarity with pepper in various forms, as both seasoning and medicine. Piperine, black pepper's active compound at 5 to 9% of its dry weight, has been confirmed to enhance the bioavailability of dozens of nutrients beyond curcumin. A 2007 study confirmed piperine increased selenium absorption by 54%. Separate research documented 200% enhancement of vitamin B12 absorption. These discoveries created the scientific field called bioenhancement, studying how one compound modifies the body's uptake of everything else. Your family put pepper on everything. That was precisely correct. Black pepper turned out to be the key that unlocked what everything else on the table contained. The next dish on this list was also on every table in a different form, and the science behind what it contains places it at the top of every nutrient density list ever compiled. Section 58. Pork, liver fried in onions until the edges went dark, and the inside stayed just pink enough. It smelled like iron and something richer than muscle meat, and your family either loved it completely or tolerated it, depending on who you asked. Your grandmother made it right, which meant the onions were soft first and the liver was sliced thin and cooked fast so it never turned grainy. You learned at her table whether you were a person who ate liver, and the answer was usually yes. Pork liver came to Black American kitchens because enslaved people received what was discarded from the whole animal. Prime cuts went to the house, and the organs came down to the quarters, where they were incorporated into a cuisine that wasted nothing and extracted maximum nutrition from every part of the animal delivered. A single 3-ounce serving of cooked pork liver delivers 222% of the daily recommended value for vitamin B12, 53% for riboflavin, and 50% for folate, alongside significant zinc, copper, and more bioavailable iron than any other common food source. Nutritional scientists now describe liver as the most nutrient-dense whole food available per calorie by any standard measure. Your family ate it because it was given to them. Researchers now recommend it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What was handed down as a leftover was the most nutrient-dense food at the table. The next dish on this list was also grown close to the ground from seeds your family saved, and the science behind what specific varieties contain rewrote how agricultural researchers think about heirloom crops. Section 59. Pole beans. Strung on the porch through the hottest part of summer, they came in by the basketful and the whole family sat around a newspaper spread on the floor, breaking off the ends and snapping them into thirds until there was enough to fill the pot and the freezer both. The sound of snapping beans through a long afternoon was specific and rhythmic and meant a certain kind of summer was happening, the kind where the work of August fed the table through February. Pole beans represent one of the oldest continuously maintained garden traditions in Black Southern agriculture, with specific heirloom varieties preserved through seed saving across generations entirely outside commercial agriculture. Cornfield beans grown as part of the Three Sisters system alongside corn and squash have been maintained in Black Appalachian and Southern families through unbroken seed stewardship that agricultural researchers have only recently begun to document genetically. Heirloom pole bean varieties consistently show higher antioxidant content than commercial varieties in laboratory analysis, with the specific pigments in colored varieties delivering flavonoid concentrations 2 to 3 times higher than standard grocery store beans. Pole beans also contain significant folate, vitamin K1, and silicon, which supports connective tissue and bone health. Your family saved the seeds from the best plants each year. The seed saving was the science. Those afternoon sessions preserved something that plant geneticists are now studying formally. The next dish on this list was also grown from saved seeds and carries specific science, and what researchers found inside it changed how nutritionists think about magnesium deficiency in the modern diet. Section 60. Pumpkin seeds. After the pumpkin was cut open for pie or for soup, the seeds came out in strings that your family cleaned and salted and roasted flat on a baking sheet until they were crisp and golden and tasted completely different from what they had come from. This was the part that would otherwise have gone to the compost, turned into the snack that lasted through autumn afternoons, eaten by the handful without any measure or record of what it contained. Pumpkins have been cultivated across the Americas for at least 7,000 years, and were central to the Three Sisters agricultural system that Black farmers adapted and maintained throughout the South after emancipation. Pumpkin seeds specifically appear in Black Southern food culture as a practical winter snack, dried and preserved after the fall harvest, their nutritional density recognized through tradition long before laboratory analysis confirmed what was there. A single ounce of pumpkin seeds delivers 37% of the daily recommended magnesium intake, among the highest concentrations of any common food. Magnesium deficiency affects an estimated 68% of American adults and is linked specifically to hypertension, insulin resistance, anxiety, and disrupted sleep. Pumpkin seeds also contain significant tryptophan and zinc supporting immune function. Your family roasted what remained after the pie was made. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The seeds from the pie filling held what 68% of American adults are deficient in. The next dish on this list was also made from what remained after the main event, and the science inside it belongs in the same conversation about what the body is most commonly missing. Section 61. Sauce. Made in a large pot from the head of the hog, after everything else had been claimed, it simmered for hours, until the meat fell from every crevice, the liquid setting into a firm gel as it cooled, and the whole thing pressed into a loaf that sliced clean. Your family ate it cold on crackers or bread, vinegar over the top, the flavor deep and unlike anything that came from a prettier cut. It required knowing what to do with the whole animal and the patience to do it right. Sauce, also called head cheese, represents the fullest expression of whole animal cooking in Black American cuisine. The tradition of taking what plantation owners discarded and producing something that required more skill than any of the cuts they kept. The gelatin extracted from the skull and facial bones creates a natural aspect that preserves the meat without refrigeration, a preservation technology built into the recipe itself. Rich in glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline, the gelatin matrix in sauce supplies the same amino acids now sold as premium collagen supplements, with research documenting these compounds' roles in gut lining integrity, joint repair, and sleep quality. Your family made it from what was left. Researchers charge premium prices for what it contains. The most dismissed preparation held what the supplement industry now sells at premium. The next dish on this list was also made from what remained after the main meal, and the science behind it contains one of the most unexpected reversals in nutritional history. Section 62. Prune cake. Dense and dark, and kept under a cloth on the counter for days without going stale. It was the kind of cake that improved with time rather than declining, and your family made it for winter gatherings when fresh fruit was gone, and the dried plums in the cabinet were what the season offered. The spices went in heavy, and the prunes went in whole or chopped, and the result tasted like preservation itself, like something that had been thought about before it was made. Prune cake and similar dried fruit desserts represent a Black American baking tradition specifically adapted to winter months, when preserved ingredients substituted for fresh ones, and the skill of the baker was measured by what could be made from what the pantry held. The recipes traveled north with the Great Migration, maintaining winter traditions in kitchens far from the original orchards. Dried plums contain sorbitol and diphenyl istatin, regulating bowel function, alongside chlorogenic acid linked to reduced diabetes and liver disease risk. A 2011 randomized controlled trial confirmed dried plum consumption improved bone density markers more effectively than calcium supplementation alone in postmenopausal women. The FDA renamed prunes as dried plums in 2000 to reduce consumer resistance. Your family had been eating them for generations without needing the rebranding. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The winter cake outperformed calcium supplements for bone density. The next dish on this list was also a winter staple, carrying something specific, and what researchers confirmed about it placed it in a category that changed how scientists understand the relationship between processing and nutrition. Section 63. Cracklins. Out of the lard pot when the rendering was done, they came up dark and crisp and salty, the pieces of pork skin that had fried in their own fat until every bit of moisture cooked out. Your family ate them still hot, sprinkled with salt and sometimes cayenne, and they lasted in a paper bag for days if they made it that far. They were the bonus that appeared at the end of the work of rendering, the thing that emerged when everything else had been extracted from the animal. Cracklins represent the final extraction from the same whole animal cooking tradition that produced chitterlings, sauce, and neck bones. Enslaved cooks rendered lard for the main house and kept the cracklins that resulted. Another instance where the byproduct of labor performed for others became direct nutrition for the household doing the work. Cracklins contain essentially no carbohydrates while delivering significant protein alongside glycine in concentrated form. Research published in 2019 in a peer-reviewed nutrition journal found daily glycine supplementation improved sleep quality and reduced fatigue in randomized trials. The collagen precursors in pork skin are now the primary ingredient in premium joint, skin, and sleep supplements sold worldwide at significant markup. Your family ate them out of the pan. The supplement industry repackaged what your family already knew. Those cracklings from the lard pot held what the wellness industry markets at premium price. The next dish on this list also contains something that turned up later in a completely different context, and what researchers confirmed about it placed it in a category that changed how scientists understand a fundamental biological process. Section 64. Cabbage, smothered in a pot with bacon grease and onion, until every layer went translucent and sweet. It collapsed into something that bore almost no resemblance to the tight, pale head that had come home from the store. Your family cooked it low and long and ate it piled beside cornbread or whatever else was on the plate, and the pot got scraped clean every time. It was cheap and it was filling and it was reliable, and those three things together made it a constant. Cabbage has fed Black Southern kitchens since the colonial period, requiring almost no input from the soil, producing large heads in both spring and fall, and storing longer than nearly any other vegetable without preservation. It crossed into Black kitchen tradition through both European agricultural influence and its nutritional overlap with the leafy green cooking practices already embedded in West African cooking. Sulforaphane and indole 3-carbinol, the primary active compounds in cabbage, interact directly with DNA methylation, the mechanism by which genes are switched on and off without changing the underlying genetic sequence. This discovery placed cabbage family vegetables at the center of epigenetics research. A 2012 review confirmed these compounds reduce expression of cancer-promoting genes across multiple tissue types. Your family cooked it until it disappeared. The sulforaphane remained. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That smothered cabbage was operating at the level of gene expression. The next dish on this list was also ordinary and affordable on the Black family table, and what researchers confirmed about what it contains placed it at the very top of a specific nutritional category. Section 65. Oysters. Your family ate them raw at the shore, or fried in cornmeal in a cast iron skillet, or stewed in milk with butter until the edges just curled, and either way the taste was specific to where they came from, and to the person who cooked them. Gullah Geechee families along the South Carolina and Georgia coast gathered oysters as part of a continuous tradition stretching back through freedom and before it, the shell middens building over generations into the mounds still visible along the sea islands today. Oyster gathering and roasting defined the social calendar in coastal Black communities across the South Atlantic, with oyster roasts functioning as community events where the work of gathering and the pleasure of eating happened simultaneously. The coastal lowcountry provided one of the few environments where Black families could claim consistent access to a food the market system had not yet monopolized. Oysters contain more zinc per serving than any other food on Earth, delivering 74 milligrams per 100-gram serving against a daily recommended value of 11 milligrams. Zinc governs immune cell production, wound healing, DNA synthesis, and taste perception. A 2021 systematic review confirmed zinc deficiency worsens outcomes in every major infectious disease studied. Your family ate oysters because they were there, and they were good. The zinc came along without any requirement to understand it. That oyster roast delivered more immune support per bite than anything else on any table. The next dish on this list was also gathered from the water on affordable terms, and what researchers found inside it changed how nutritionists talk about the most important dietary deficiency in the modern world. Section 66. Canned sardines and mackerel. The tin came from the cabinet and opened with a key that peeled back the lid in a strip, and the smell that rose was strong and specific, something oceanic and oily that announced itself to the whole kitchen. Your family ate them on crackers with hot sauce, mixed into potato salad, or heated in a pan with onion, until the bones dissolved and the whole thing flaked into something that coated everything it touched. Nobody called it fancy. It was protein, and it was ready. Canned fish entered Black American kitchens as the most affordable animal protein available, purchased from corner stores and neighborhood markets across both the rural South and the urban North at price points that made protein accessible to households operating at the margins of what the food budget could hold. Canned sardines and mackerel eaten with the bones deliver a specific combination that nutritional researchers describe as nearly impossible to replicate from other single sources. Approximately 200 to 350 milligrams of calcium per tin from dissolved bones, 1.5 to 2 grams of omega-3 fatty acids, a full serving of vitamin D, and complete protein. A 2019 Tufts University analysis identified canned sardines as the most nutrient-dense affordable protein available to low-income American households. Your family bought them because they were inexpensive. That was the most nutritionally accurate decision available. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The cheapest protein turned out to be the most complete one. The next dish on this list was also reached for because it was affordable, and what it actually contained places it among the most studied compounds in cardiovascular research. Section 67. Turnip greens. Milder than mustard and more tender than collards, they cooked down faster and left a pot liquor that ran slightly sweeter than the bitter of the other greens. Your family often mixed them in, adding turnip greens to the pot to balance something that had gone too bitter, or cooking them alone with the small white turnips that came up alongside them, the root going into one pot and the green into another so nothing from the ground went unused. Turnip greens represent a distinct tradition within the broader Black Southern green cooking culture, grown specifically for the combination of root and leaf that offered two separate harvests from one plant. Enslaved people cultivated them in provision gardens because the turnip root stored through winter, while the greens could be harvested repeatedly through the growing season from the same plant. Turnip greens contain gluconapin, a glucosinolate distinct from those found in collards and mustard greens, which converts in the body to a different family of isothiocyanates with documented specificity against estrogen-dependent cancer cell lines. They also deliver more calcium per serving than any other commonly cooked green, including collards, with 197 milligrams per cooked cup against a daily recommended value of 1,000 milligrams. Your family used them to balance the pot. They were doing considerably more than that. Turnip greens delivered more calcium than any other cooked green in the pot. The next dish on this list was also assembled from specific plant parts and held something that researchers only recently confirmed occupies a unique category in cancer prevention. Section 68. Pig feet pickled in a jar of red brine that lined the counter at every corner store your family ever visited, or boiled low for hours with vinegar and bay and cayenne until the skin went translucent and pulled from the cartilage cleanly. They were either a thing your family ate without thinking, or a thing that took getting used to, and there was rarely anyone in between. Your family knew which side they were on and ordered accordingly. Pig feet arrived in Black American kitchens through the same dispossession that produced every other organ and extremity in the tradition. The prime cuts went to the house, the feet were given to the quarters, and the people who received them developed a preparation that extracted maximum nutrition from maximum collagen over maximum time. Pig feet are among the richest dietary sources of type 2 collagen, the specific form that research has linked most directly to joint cartilage repair and reduced arthritis symptoms. A 2016 randomized controlled trial found type 2 collagen supplementation reduced knee osteoarthritis pain by 40% and improved mobility by 33% compared to placebo. Pig feet also deliver glycine at concentrations that studies confirm improve sleep onset and sleep quality. Your family pickled what was given to them. Scientists later bottled what it contained. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The pickled feet in the jar held the specific collagen that joint supplements now sell at significant markup. The next dish on this list was also given rather than chosen, and what it contained turns out to address one of the most widespread nutritional gaps in the modern American diet. Section 69. Kidney beans, red and kidney-shaped and dried in a bag that lasted through the winter without any refrigeration required. They soaked overnight and went into the pot the next morning and cooked for hours until the liquid turned dark and thick and the beans themselves gave slightly when pressed between two fingers. Your family served them over rice or beside cornbread, and they filled the plate in a way that made everything else on it feel supplemental. Kidney beans were part of the same Atlantic exchange that brought black-eyed peas, reaching the American South through multiple routes and settling into black kitchens as one of several legumes that could be stored indefinitely, cooked from nothing, and stretched across a family regardless of size. Kidney beans contain phytohemagglutinin, a lectin compound that functions as a natural pesticide in the plant and requires full cooking to deactivate. The same lectin, in its properly cooked and deactivated form, has been studied for its ability to stimulate immune cell proliferation and reduce colorectal cancer risk in epidemiological data. A 2018 analysis found populations with high kidney bean consumption showed a 22% reduction in colorectal cancer incidence. Your family soaked them overnight and cooked them through completely because that was how it was done. That was exactly correct. The overnight soak and the full cooking were precision biology that the science confirmed decades later. The next dish on this list also required specific preparation to unlock what it held, and what researchers found inside it places it in a conversation that changed how scientists understand one of the most critical nutrients in brain development. Section 70. Canned salmon. Pink salmon came from a flat can that opened cleanly with a tab, and your family mashed it with mayonnaise and onion and sometimes a little mustard, and made patties that fried up golden in the cast iron for a weeknight supper that cost almost nothing and filled every plate at the table. The small, round, white bones got mashed in with everything else because they were soft enough to eat, and your grandmother said they were the best part, which the science eventually confirmed was accurate. Canned salmon entered Black American kitchens as an affordable source of animal protein that traveled well, stored without refrigeration, and could be stretched into multiple meals with pantry ingredients already on hand. It appeared on Friday tables particularly, following the tradition of fish as the protein that cost less than meat and stretched further with the right preparation. The soft bones in canned salmon deliver calcium in a ratio of calcium to phosphorus that research identifies as optimal for bone absorption, alongside vitamin D at concentrations rarely found in affordable foods. The omega-3 fatty acids in salmon specifically include DHA, the compound that comprises 40% of the brain's fatty acid content and is linked to cognitive development in children and cognitive resilience in aging. Your grandmother said the bones were the best part. Researchers would not disagree. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The bones your grandmother mashed in held the calcium in the ratio the body uses most efficiently. The next dish on this list also contains something that researchers have confirmed matters most during specific life stages, and what is inside it has been studied across cultures for thousands of years. Section 71. Goat milk and goat cheese. Kept by families who maintained animals on small plots of land through the rural South, goat milk was the dairy of the black household that could afford one animal but not a cow. And the milk it produced was different enough from what came from a store that your family never confused the two. Richer and thinner at the same time, with a flavor that carried through even when it was cooked into something else. It went into biscuits and into soft cheese, pressed through cheesecloth, and into drinks for children who could not tolerate what the grocery store sold. Goat keeping was among the most accessible forms of animal husbandry available to black families after emancipation, requiring significantly less land and feed than cattle, while providing both milk and meat from a single animal. The tradition appears across the black rural South through the early 20th century as a marker of marginal but meaningful food security. Goat milk contains A2 casein protein rather than the A1 form found in most commercial cow's milk, a structural difference that research has linked to reduced inflammation and improved digestibility in people who report difficulty with conventional dairy. It also delivers more magnesium, potassium, and vitamin A per serving than cow's milk with smaller fat globules that require no homogenization. Your family kept a goat because they needed the milk. The A2 protein was the reason it sat better. That goat milk was easier on the body for reasons researchers only identified in the 21st century. The next dish on this list was also considered a humble substitute, and what it actually contained turned out to outperform what it was replacing. Section 72. Sorghum syrup. Poured from the jar, it ran slow and dark, deeper than molasses and less sweet, with a flavor that carried something mineral underneath the sugar, an earthiness that meant it had come from a plant rather than a refinery. Your family used it on biscuits and in baking, and in some households drank a spoonful directly as a morning tonic, the way other families reached for cod liver oil, with the same certainty that it was doing something specific, and the same lack of interest in specifying what. Sorghum syrup differs from sorghum grain, being the boiled-down juice of the sweet sorghum stalk pressed and reduced over open heat until it thickens. The syrup tradition is specifically American and specifically Southern, developed in the mid-1800s as both a substitute for cane sugar and as an independent product with its own character, produced extensively by black farming families who grew the crop and ran the mills. Sorghum syrup retains the polyphenol content of the whole plant through the reduction process, concentrating 3-deoxyanthocyanidins at levels substantially higher than the grain alone. It also delivers iron, calcium, potassium, and B6 in ratios comparable to blackstrap molasses while carrying its own unique antioxidant profile that researchers have only recently begun to formally document. Your family poured it slow from the jar, the polyphenols concentrated with every degree of heat. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The slow-pouring syrup concentrated what the plant spent the season building. The next dish on this list was also reduced from something raw into something concentrated, and what researchers found inside the concentrated form placed it in a conversation about one of the most studied mechanisms in anti-aging science. Section 73. Vinegar pie. Made when the fruit ran out and winter was not done, it used what was in the cabinet, which was vinegar and sugar and eggs and butter and whatever spice was at hand, and what came out of the oven was a custard that tasted more complex than its ingredients suggested, something tart and sweet and custardy that nobody who had not eaten it would have guessed from the recipe. Your family made it when nothing else was available to make pie from. It was a pie built entirely from necessity. Vinegar pie represents the black Southern baking tradition at its most resourceful, using the acidic sharpness of vinegar to substitute for fresh fruit in a custard filling that required no seasonal ingredient. The tradition appears across Appalachian and Southern Black cookbooks from the late 19th and early 20th centuries as a consistent solution to the gap between winter and the first spring fruit. Apple cider vinegar used in the filling delivers acetic acid into a slow-cooked custard matrix that the body absorbs differently than straight vinegar, with the fat and protein content of the eggs and butter potentially extending the AMP activation window that straight vinegar produces briefly. Emerging research on the delivery timing of acetic acid suggests that food matrix consumption may produce more sustained metabolic effects than vinegar consumed alone. Your family made pie when fruit was gone. The science is still measuring what the custard held. That resourcefulness produced a preparation science is still examining. The next dish on this list was also born of necessity, and what it contained turns out to address one of the most specific gaps in the modern diet, while sitting inside something your family made every single week. Section 74. Peanut butter. Spread thick from the knife onto bread or crackers, or stirred directly off the spoon, or worked into sauces the way West African tradition used ground nuts for centuries before the word peanut existed in English. Your family kept a jar at all times because it was affordable and filling, and because everyone would eat it, which in a household managing a food budget was a combination worth more than most nutritional labels could explain. George Washington Carver developed over 300 products from the peanut at Tuskegee Institute beginning in 1896, specifically to provide black Southern farmers an alternative to cotton that would rebuild nitrogen-depleted soil while generating income. His research helped establish the commercial peanut butter industry your family later consumed by the jar. Roasting and grinding peanuts significantly increases niacin bioavailability and concentrates resveratrol and p-coumaric acid into forms the body absorbs more efficiently than from the raw nut. 2 tablespoons deliver 8 grams of protein alongside significant magnesium, phosphorus, and B3. A 2002 study from Harvard found women who ate peanut butter at least 5 times weekly showed a 27% reduction in type 2 diabetes risk. Your family kept it because it was affordable. Scientists confirmed it was optimal. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That jar produced from Tuskegee research held something medicine confirmed decades later. The next dish on this list also grew from what poor black families already ate, and what researchers found inside it rewrote how scientists measure a specific nutritional category. Section 75. Purslane. Low and flat to the garden path, with thick succulent leaves, and red stems that tasted slightly sour and slightly mineral. It grew without being planted and came back without being tended. Your family may have called it by a different name or pulled it as a weed entirely, but somebody in the household knew it was edible, and in a kitchen that used everything available, that knowledge became a meal. Purslane was gathered by enslaved people from garden plots and field edges as a supplementary green, its availability through summer heat and drought making it reliable when other plants failed. It appears in Charles Ball's 1836 narrative as a food gathered specifically when rations ran short, alongside lamb's quarters and other foraged greens that survival required. Purslane contains more omega-3 fatty acids than any other leafy plant, delivering 400 milligrams of alpha-linolenic acid per 100-gram serving, a concentration that rivals many fish oil supplements. It is also the richest plant source of betalain pigments, the antioxidants found in beets, now studied for anti-inflammatory and liver protective effects. Your family may have pulled it as a weed. The plant was the medicine. What looked like a weed held what fish oil supplements sell at premium price. The next dish on this list was also dismissed as beneath notice, and what researchers found inside it belongs in a category that changed a foundational assumption in plant-based nutrition. Section 76. Brine pickles made in a crock or a jar with salt and water, and whatever was going into the brine that week. Cucumbers and okra and green tomatoes and cabbage depending on the season and what the garden was giving. They sat on the counter for days, fermenting until the bubbles slowed and the sour had gone all the way through. Your family pulled them out cold and ate them alongside everything else on the plate, the salt and the sour cutting through the richness that everything else carried. Home pickling in salt brine rather than vinegar creates lacto-fermented vegetables through bacterial fermentation, producing live lactobacillus cultures that survive into the jar. The distinction matters fundamentally. Commercial vinegar pickles are preserved but not fermented, while traditional salt brine pickles carry active probiotic cultures with documented gut microbiome effects. A 2019 randomized trial found regular consumption of traditionally fermented vegetables increased microbial diversity by 19% over 6 weeks, with associated reductions in inflammatory markers. A landmark 2021 Cell study confirmed fermented food diets increased microbiome diversity more reliably than high-fiber diets alone. Your family made both kinds. The brine ones held the living culture. The vinegar ones tasted similar but were not the same thing. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The brine jar held something alive that the vinegar jar did not. The next dish on this list was also made from fermentation, and what researchers found inside it belongs at the center of the most actively studied area in nutritional science today. Section 77. Corn silk tea. Stripped from the ear before the corn went into the pot. The pale gold strands got set aside rather than discarded. Dried or used fresh in a tea that steeped until the water ran amber and tasted faintly sweet and slightly green. Your family made it for specific complaints: water retention, kidney pressure, difficulty urinating. Whatever the older people called the category of things this particular preparation was understood to address. It was the medicine made from the part everyone else threw away. Corn silk tea sits within Black Southern and Appalachian folk medicine tradition, used across communities as a diuretic and kidney tonic for generations before any laboratory analysis confirmed what it contained. The practice crossed from indigenous American traditions into Black Southern households through the same channels that preserved poke salad and sassafras knowledge. Corn silk contains mason, a unique flavonoid found in meaningful concentrations almost exclusively in corn silk and now studied for diuretic properties, antioxidant activity, and blood pressure effects. A 2012 randomized trial confirmed corn silk extract reduced blood pressure in hypertensive patients significantly compared to placebo. Your family threw nothing away. The part that looked most like waste held something specific. What was stripped from the ear before cooking held a blood pressure compound a clinical trial later confirmed. The next dish on this list was also made from the part everyone removed before eating, and what science found inside it changed a fundamental assumption about where certain nutrients live. Section 78. Watermelon seeds spit onto the back porch or set aside in a dish when someone was paying attention. They were the thing everyone removed before eating and the thing nobody considered worth keeping until somebody's grandmother insisted otherwise. Spread on a baking sheet with salt and dried in the oven, they came out crunchy and dense and tasted like a different food entirely, something between a nut and a seed. Your family either roasted them or lost them onto the ground, and both seemed equally reasonable at the time. Black American communities maintained the tradition of roasting and eating watermelon seeds more consistently than other American communities, a practice connected directly to West African culinary traditions where melon seeds are still roasted and ground into pastes for soups across Nigeria and Ghana today. Watermelon seeds deliver 8 grams of protein per ounce, more than most tree nuts, alongside significant magnesium, zinc, and iron. They contain citrulline at higher concentrations than the flesh, and deliver folate at levels comparable to leafy greens. A 100-gram serving provides 35% of the daily folate requirement. Your family spit them out or saved them. Saving them was the nutritionally correct decision by a significant margin. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. What everyone spit out held more protein than most nuts, and more folate than most greens. The next dish on this list was also made from a part of something that people routinely discard, and what researchers confirmed about what it contains rewrote how scientists understand a specific compound category. Section 79. Lamb's quarters. Growing waist-high by midsummer along garden edges and vacant lots, and anywhere disturbed soil met sunlight, it had diamond-shaped leaves dusted pale underneath, and tasted like spinach with a mineral quality that spinach lacked. Your family knew it by several names depending on which part of the South the knowledge came from: goosefoot, pigweed, fat hen, lamb's quarter. The name shifted by household, but the plant stayed, and the eating of it stayed because it was there, and it was food. Lamb's quarters was documented specifically as a food gathered by enslaved people during periods of inadequate rations, appearing in multiple Federal Writers Project narratives as a reliable supplementary green that cost nothing and required no cultivation. Charles Ball's 1836 narrative described it alongside purslane and pokeweed as part of the survival foraging knowledge that sustained enslaved communities between rations. Lamb's quarters delivers more protein per gram than spinach, more calcium than milk by weight, and more beta-carotene than carrots by a significant margin. It contains a complete amino acid profile rare in any non-legume plant. A single cooked cup provides 42% of the daily value for vitamin A. Your family picked it because it grew. The picking was precision nutrition without a name. The weed contained more nutrition per gram than most of what was planted deliberately in the same garden. The next dish on this list was also assembled from what the land offered freely, and the science behind what it contains places it in the same conversation as some of the most studied compounds in functional food research. Section 80. Ground nut soup. Smooth and savory, and deeper than anything that came from a single ingredient, it landed on the table in a bowl that smelled of roasted peanuts and tomato and something spiced underneath. And your family made it either as a direct tradition or as something the kitchen arrived at independently, the way two separate streams of knowledge can arrive at the same river. West Africa had been making it for centuries before a single slave ship crossed the Atlantic. What crossed was the knowledge of how to make it work. Groundnut soup traces directly to the foundational stew traditions of Senegambia, Guinea, and the Gold Coast, crossing the Atlantic in memory and in practice through Gullah Geechee communities who preserved it most directly. Variations appear across the Black American culinary record from Virginia Tidewater kitchens to Louisiana, changing names while the preparation stayed consistent. Traditional groundnut soup combines complete peanut protein with lycopene from tomato, allicin from onion, and capsaicin from pepper in a single bowl, a compound combination that nutritional researchers would classify as synergistic. The fat from ground peanuts simultaneously increases lycopene bioavailability by 200 to 400%. Your family made one pot. Scientists are still studying that specific combination. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That single bowl combined 4 studied compounds in a configuration that maximizes each one's absorption. The next dish on this list was also a West African preparation preserved across the crossing, and what researchers confirmed about what it contains holds something the refining process systematically removed. Section 81. Raw sugar cane peeled with a knife and cut into sections to chew down to the dry fiber, the juice running sweet and faintly grassy and nothing like refined sugar. It was a seasonal thing in the Deep South that your family ate directly or bought from vendors who had it cut and bagged in summer heat. Children stripped the outer layer with their teeth when no knife was available, chewing the pulp until it gave up everything and nothing remained. The flavor was specific, and the season was short, and both made it worth remembering. Sugarcane cultivation built colonial wealth entirely on the labor of enslaved African people who grew and cut and processed a crop they could not profit from, while developing alongside that labor an intimate knowledge of the plant itself that extended beyond the refined product the plantation extracted. Raw sugarcane juice retains polycosanol, a mixture of long-chain alcohols that clinical research has confirmed reduces LDL cholesterol and increases HDL comparably to some pharmaceutical interventions. A 2002 Cuban study found daily polycosanol reduced LDL by 27% over 12 weeks. The refining process removes it entirely. Your family chewed the raw stalk. The medicine was in the juice the refinery discarded. The refining process that built the plantation economy removed the compound that protected the people doing the labor. The next dish on this list was also transformed by processing into something less nutritious than the original, and what researchers found in the traditional preparation placed it above the refined version in every category measured. Section 82. Clabber. Left on the counter until it thickened and soured naturally, it predated refrigeration and produced a cultured milk your family used in baking, poured over cornbread, or ate with a spoon when nothing else accompanied the evening meal. The sourness was sharp and specific and different from buttermilk by degree, and your family knew which one worked for which use without measuring or explaining, because the knowledge was in the hands and not the recipe card. Clabber, naturally soured whole milk thickened through wild bacterial fermentation at room temperature, was a staple in Black Southern and Appalachian households through the mid-20th century, when refrigeration gradually replaced the countertop tradition. The wild culture in Clabber is more diverse than commercial buttermilk, delivering a broader probiotic spectrum. Research on diverse lactic acid bacterial strains from traditionally fermented dairy has documented effects on microbiome diversity, immune regulation, and specifically on production of short-chain fatty acids including butyrate. A landmark 2021 Cell study found fermented food diets consistently increased microbiome diversity more effectively than high-fiber diets alone. Your family soured milk on the counter because refrigerators were expensive. That turned out to be the optimal fermentation method. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Souring milk on the counter produced more diverse cultures than any commercial product. The next dish on this list was also transformed by time and temperature into something the science confirms is more valuable than what it started as, and what the transformation produces is now the most actively studied mechanism in all of nutritional research. Section 83. Bean pot liquor. What settled dark at the bottom of the pot after the beans finished cooking was not waste. Your family ladled it over rice or sopped it with cornbread, recognizing without naming it that the liquid was part of the meal. Nothing that had simmered that long and gone that dark was dismissed. Black Southern cooking had no formal concept of wasting bean liquid because the tradition never allowed it. Pot liquor in every form carried nutrition from vegetables and legumes alike, and the practice of drinking what remained traveled north with the Great Migration intact. Cooked bean liquid contains released resistant starch, soluble fiber, potassium, and isoflavones, with documented prebiotic activity confirmed in a 2017 study. The gut microbiome receives bean liquid identically to the beans themselves. Your family drank what settled at the bottom. The bottom was the point. Drinking the liquid doubled what the beans alone could deliver. The next dish on this list also came from knowledge of a specific place, and what researchers found inside it rewrote how scientists classify a critical antioxidant compound. Section 84. Wild blackberries. Along fence rows in July, heat the canes caught your clothes and stained everything your hands touched for the rest of the day. Your family filled buckets or paper bags or whatever was closest, eating as much as went into the container, and the purple stayed under your nails regardless of what you used to clean it. It was the stain that proved the season had started. Wild blackberries grew freely on fence lines and field margins that no plantation claimed specifically enough to police. Enslaved communities and their descendants gathered them as food that cost nothing beyond knowledge of where and when. Wild varieties consistently show higher anthocyanin concentrations than cultivated supermarket berries. Blackberries contain pterostilbene, significantly more bioavailable than resveratrol, shown in 2012 aging research to reduce cognitive decline markers more effectively. Your family picked them free from summer fence rows. Scientists later confirmed the purple stain marked the most bioavailable compound in the berry family. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That summer stain marked the highest bioavailability compound in the berry family. The next dish on this list also came from knowing a specific body of water, and what researchers confirmed about what it contains belongs in the same conversation as the most critical minerals in immune function. Section 85. Blue crab, steamed red with seasoning and eaten at a table, covered in newspaper. They required skill to eat as much as skill to catch. Your family cracked claws with the heel of a hand and pulled sweet meat from every chamber, patient with the process, because the work and the eating were the same ritual. Nothing about it was casual, even when it looked it. Gullah Geechee families along the South Carolina and Georgia coast maintained specific tidal and seasonal knowledge of crabbing grounds through generations, building food sovereignty tied entirely to water access and the knowledge of it. Blue crab delivers more than 40 micrograms of selenium per 100 gram serving, approaching the full daily recommended value in a single meal. A 2021 systematic review confirmed selenium deficiency worsened outcomes across every major viral infection studied. Your family steamed crabs because the tidal creek provided them. The selenium came with the crabs. That steaming pot delivered immune resilience through minerals the creek ran with. The next dish on this list also came from specific water knowledge, and the science behind its active compounds represents 3 simultaneous blood sugar mechanisms in a single preparation. Section 86. Bitter melon. Intensely green and rough-skinned and bitter enough to make your face contract on contact. It appeared in kitchens with Caribbean lineage or West African connection. Your family cooked it with salt and garlic to cut the edge, and ate it sliced thin or pickled in brine. You ate it because somebody specific in the household knew what it was for, and that specificity was its own kind of authority. Bitter melon arrived in Caribbean black kitchens through Indian Ocean trade routes and settled into Jamaican, Trinidadian, and Black American tables through migration. It appears in black herbalism records specifically as a remedy for elevated blood sugar, called sugar in the blood by those who used it. Bitter melon contains charantin, vicine, and polypeptide P, 3 separate compounds each confirmed to lower blood glucose through distinct mechanisms. A 2011 randomized trial found bitter melon extract reduced HbA1c significantly. Your family ate it because it was bitter. Bitter things worked. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. 3 separate blood sugar mechanisms arrived in 1 bitter vegetable. The next dish on this list was also carried from West Africa as medicine, and what researchers confirmed about what it contains placed it at the top of every micronutrient density chart ever compiled. Section 87. Moringa. Dried to powder or stripped fresh from the branch, it went into soups and stews, where the mild flavor disappeared into whatever surrounded it. Your family may have known it as the miracle tree, which was a name outsiders gave to something communities who grew it had never stopped knowing. The name arrived late to something the knowledge had always understood. Moringa oleifera grew across West Africa and the Caribbean long before European contact. crossing into American households through Caribbean migration routes. Tuskegee researchers examined it as a nutritional crop in the early 20th century, within the same institutional tradition as Carver's agricultural work. Moringa leaves deliver more vitamin C than oranges, more calcium than milk, more vitamin A than carrots, and more protein per gram than most legumes, documented across independent laboratory analyses. A 2015 systematic review confirmed moringa improved outcomes across multiple nutrient deficiency categories. Your family called it the green that fixed things. What researchers called remarkable, your family already called by name. The next dish on this list was also assembled with precision, and what that specific preparation technique produces doubles the nutritional value of what goes into it. Section 88. Smothered pork chops. Browned in the cast iron and then covered with onion and stock and cooked low until the meat gave completely from the bone, they came to the table with gravy that pooled across everything on the plate. Your family left the bone in because that was how it was done, and the bones went back into the pot afterward because the session continued well past the meal. Smothered pork chops represent the braising tradition running through all black Southern cooking, combining Maillard browning compounds from the initial sear with collagen extraction from long bone-in simmering, each stage contributing compounds the other cannot produce alone. Bone-in braised meats deliver significantly higher zinc concentrations than boneless preparations, confirmed in a 2018 study. Maillard browning produces antioxidant melanoidins not present in unbrowned meat. Your family browned first, then simmered with the bone in, then used the bones again. Each step was biochemistry without a name. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Browning first and simmering bone-in changed two separate nutritional outcomes simultaneously. The next dish on this list also changed its nutritional profile through a specific method your family used, and researchers confirmed that transformation quadrupled a key cancer prevention compound. Section 89. Boiled peanuts. Sold from a roadside pot or made in a slow cooker with salt and seasoning, they were pulled from the shell one at a time, with brine coming along with the soft pea inside. The texture was nothing like roasted, and neither was the flavor, and your family understood this as its own food entirely. Both preparations had their season and their reason, and they were not the same thing. Hot-boiled peanuts are specifically a black Southern tradition documented in South Carolina and Georgia, from the antebellum period, sold by black vendors at roadsides and carried north through the Great Migration as a portable cultural identifier. Boiling peanuts in water increases isoflavone content, particularly genistein, by up to 4 times compared to raw peanuts, according to USDA research. Genistein is among the most studied compounds in hormone-sensitive cancer prevention research. Your family boiled them by the pound. The genistein concentrated with every hour in the pot. That boiling quadrupled the cancer prevention compound the roasting method leaves behind. The next dish on this list was also transformed by a specific choice your family made, and researchers confirmed the part that typically gets discarded outperformed the part that gets kept. Section 90. Sweet potato leaves. Coming off the vine while the roots formed underground, the leaves are what West African cooking uses, and what American kitchens discard. Your family may have cooked them or pulled them as garden waste, depending on what tradition survived the crossing. In West Africa, they go into soups and stews the way collard greens go into the southern pot, and the leaf carries the stronger nutritional argument. Sweet potato leaf cooking remains central to cooking across Nigeria, Cameroon, and Ghana, recognized as a vegetable in its own right. Gullah Geechee community records from coastal Georgia preserve the West African practice most directly within the American tradition. Sweet potato leaves contain polyphenol antioxidants at concentrations significantly higher than the root, alongside protein comprising 20% of their dry weight. A 2013 study found leaf extract demonstrated anti-inflammatory activity comparable to standard anti-inflammatories. Your family may have composted the more nutritious half of the plant. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The discarded half outperformed the half your family kept. The next dish on this list was also assembled from what typically gets thrown away, and what researchers confirmed is inside it sits in the same category as what premium supplements now extract and sell. Section 91. Chicken feet. Cleaned and simmered until the skin blistered back from the tiny bones, they required knowing how to eat them, which was the same as knowing how to cook them. Your family ate them at specific gatherings or as a private kitchen habit. You knew before your first bite whether chicken feet were your food. In your family, the answer was yes. Chicken feet arrived through West African whole animal traditions and through Southern poverty cooking that wasted nothing from any slaughtered bird. The market priced them lowest because cartilage was understood as waste, by those who did not know what to do with it. Chicken feet deliver collagen at higher concentrations per gram than any other commonly consumed part of the bird. A 2019 randomized trial found animal-sourced collagen peptides improved skin elasticity and joint pain significantly over 16 weeks. The supplement industry discovered that later. What the market priced lowest, the supplement industry now prices highest. The next dish on this list was also made from the cheapest available ingredient, and what its specific preparation produces was confirmed to double the nutritional value of the base ingredient. Section 92. Hoe cakes made from stone-ground cornmeal and water and nothing else. Cooked flat in a hot cast iron until the edges crisped, they came together in minutes without measuring anything, because the proportion was in the hands from having been made 1,000 times. Your family ate them alongside beans or greens or with butter alone. They tasted like something that knew exactly what it was. Hoe cakes trace directly to West and Central African flatbread traditions transferred immediately when enslaved people encountered cornmeal. The name documents the method: cakes baked on a hoe blade over open coals when no other kitchen was available to the person cooking. Stone-ground cornmeal in cast iron produces measurably higher iron than the same recipe made in a non-stick pan with commercial cornmeal, confirmed in the 1986 Journal of the American Dietetic Association study. Your family used both without knowing the difference. Only one was doing what the body needed. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The stone-ground grain and the cast iron together doubled the iron in a cake made from nothing. The next dish on this list assembled two longevity mechanisms automatically, and what researchers confirmed about what the combination produces placed it at the center of the most active conversation in nutritional science. Section 93. Cucumber. Sliced thin in vinegar and sugar with onion, or eaten straight from the vine with salt, cucumbers came through summer as a constant on the table. Your family kept them in salted water in the refrigerator, or let them sit on the counter through the peak of the season. Cool and effortless, they were assembled without naming them as a strategy, which was precisely what they were. Cucumbers were grown in provision gardens by enslaved people through the summer rotation, providing hydration during the most demanding months. The vinegar dress tradition that defines Black Southern summer tables combines two compounds whose specific interaction researchers have only recently begun to formally document together. Cucumbers contain physin, identified in the 2018 eBiomedicine study as the most potent senolytic among 10 flavonoids tested. Dressed in apple cider vinegar, the combination activates AMP alongside senolytic activity simultaneously. Your family assembled this every summer without a biochemistry degree. Scientists are still calculating what the combination produces. That summer bowl combined two studied longevity mechanisms in one effortless preparation. The next dish on this list also carried specific science in plain view, and what researchers confirmed about it places it in a category with almost nothing else at that concentration. Section 94. Kudzu. Climbing every telephone pole and fence line and abandoned structure across the rural South, it was the vine that covered everything, and kept coming back regardless of what was done to stop it. Your family may have known its flowers could be made into jelly, or that the root had a name in folk medicine, or simply that it was what the South looked like now, and had looked like since someone planted it without understanding what they had started. Kudzu was introduced from Japan to the American South in 1876, and spreads across black rural landscapes that already understood the plant before the universities cataloged it. The root contains puerarin, an isoflavone now studied extensively in clinical trials for reducing alcohol dependence and protecting against cognitive decline. A 2012 Harvard study confirmed puerarin reduced heavy alcohol consumption by 50% in human participants. Your family saw a vine. Researchers found a compound. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The vine covering everything held a compound that clinical trials confirmed. The next dish on this list also grew wild without being invited, and what researchers found inside it sits in a category with almost nothing else at that concentration. Section 95. Sumac tart and rust-colored. Ground into powder or used as dried berries, it arrived in some black southern kitchens through Middle Eastern and West African spice traditions that survived the crossing in memory and in taste. Your family used it where lemon was unavailable or where the flavor required something drier and more complex than citrus provided. It was the spice that tasted like it came from somewhere specific. Sumac has been used in West African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean cooking for millennia as both seasoning and medicine, appearing in records alongside black pepper and cinnamon as a standard spice in trans-Saharan trade that moved through communities from which enslaved populations were taken. Sumac contains gallic acid and tannins at concentrations among the highest documented in any common spice, alongside significant vitamin C. A 2017 randomized trial found sumac supplementation reduced both fasting blood glucose and cholesterol in type 2 diabetes patients significantly. Your family added it for the tart. The gallic acid came along. That rust-colored spice lowered blood glucose and cholesterol simultaneously in a clinical trial. The next dish on this list was also a gathering constant that held something specific, and what researchers confirmed about it changed the way scientists understand a fundamental question about cooking. Section 96. Roasted corn set directly over the flame until the husks charred and the kernels underneath caramelized and the silk burned away. It came off the grill blackened in places and sweet in the center, and tasted like something summer does to corn when you let the fire have it. Your family ate it standing at the grill or brought it inside with butter and salt and sat at the table with it, and no preparation was more immediate or more specific to that season. Roasting corn directly over flame or hot coals triggers the Maillard reaction in the sugars and amino acids on the kernel surface, producing a class of compounds called melanoidins, found only in thermally processed foods. Melanoidins demonstrate documented antioxidant and prebiotic activity in laboratory research, feeding specific gut bacterial species while simultaneously neutralizing free radicals. A 2020 study confirmed roasted corn melanoidins showed greater antioxidant activity than raw corn by a significant margin. Your family charred it because it tasted better that way. The melanoidins formed precisely because of the char. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The char was the medicine that tasted like summer. The next dish on this list was also made from something your family would otherwise discard, and what researchers confirmed about what it contains rewrote how scientists think about a common vegetable preparation. Section 97. Okra water. Made by soaking whole okra pods overnight in a jar of cold water until the liquid turned thick and slightly viscous by morning. It was drunk before breakfast in households that understood it as specific medicine for blood sugar and digestion. Passed through generations of Black Southern and Caribbean folk medicine with the same certainty as elderberry syrup, and the same absence of clinical vocabulary. Okra water traditions appear in Gullah Geechee communities, Jamaican folk medicine, and West African healing practices simultaneously, each arriving independently at the same preparation from the same plant knowledge. The overnight cold soak extracts okra mucilage into water without heat, preserving polysaccharides that laboratory research confirms slow glucose absorption in the intestine and demonstrate prebiotic activity feeding bifidobacterium. A 2023 study found okra water consumption significantly reduced postprandial blood glucose in participants with prediabetes. Your family soaked pods overnight and drank what came out. The viscosity was the mechanism. That thick morning water was doing exactly what the science eventually confirmed. The next dish on this list was also a morning preparation, and what researchers found inside it sits alongside the most studied antiviral compounds in the botanical record. Section 98. Rose hips. Gathered from wild rose canes after the first frost, when they went deep red and soft, they were made into tea and jelly, and sometimes dried for the winter, tart and dense with seeds and pale flesh inside the bright outer skin. Your family gathered them from fence rows and hedgerows that nobody had planted intentionally, knowing by the color and the season that they were ready, and knowing the preparation before anyone had a name for why it worked. Rose hips contain more vitamin C per gram than any commonly consumed fruit, with a 100-gram serving delivering up to 400% of the daily recommended value. They also contain lycopene, beta-carotene, and telluroside, a flavonoid shown in a 2012 study to reduce body fat accumulation through AMP activation. A 2010 study of 31 participants confirmed daily rose hip powder supplementation significantly reduced body weight and abdominal fat over 12 weeks without dietary changes. Your family gathered them after the frost. The frost made them sweeter and the science more concentrated. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The frost concentrated what the summer had built toward. The next dish on this list was also made from something specific your family knew how to read by season, and what it contains draws a quiet thread through everything this list has covered. Section 99. Wood sorrel small and clover-shaped with heart-shaped leaflets that folded closed at night and opened in morning light. It grew along garden paths and in disturbed soil everywhere your family ever planted anything. Children chewed it for the sour, which was the oxalic acid giving the plant its lemony bite. Your family knew it as sour grass or sour weed, or simply as the small sour plant in the garden, and somebody always knew it was edible even when nobody said why. Wood sorrel was gathered across the rural South as a free acidic green available through most of the growing season. appearing in field narratives as a foraging green alongside lamb's quarters and purslane, in accounts of how enslaved people supplemented inadequate rations. Wood sorrel contains significant vitamin C alongside oxalic acid, malic acid, and flavonoids including quercetin and isovitexin, now studied for anti-diabetic and hepatoprotective effects. The plant's sour taste was always the vitamin C announcing itself before anyone had a word for vitamins. That sour bite was vitamin C announcing itself centuries before the name existed. The next and final dish on this list draws every thread together quietly, because your ancestors assembled something the laboratory is still learning how to measure. Section 100. The pot. Sitting on the stove in every kitchen that fed you, holding whatever the season and the paycheck allowed, it combined what your family knew with what was available, and produced something that sustained the people eating it through conditions that required sustaining. The pot was not a concept, it was a specific object with a specific smell and a specific set of hands that tended it, and everything it held was chosen by a knowledge that predated every study on this list. Your ancestors carried seeds in their hair across the Atlantic. They soaked beans overnight before anyone had named anti-nutrients. They boiled bitter plants twice and paired iron-rich greens with acidic pot liquor to raise absorption before bioavailability was a word. They grew drought-resistant crops in poor soil, extracted gelatin from bones, built probiotics from soured milk, and fermented beverages that protected against the diseases surrounding them, all without a laboratory, all before the science arrived to confirm what the practice already knew. 100 dishes into this list, the same pattern holds. The knowledge was always there first. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.